Hello everyone, this is Kawainame TV. This video is all about what if Sasuke didn't leave the Konoha Part 2. This story is a fanfiction. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Kindly click the bell button for more updates. Chapter 7. Finals, last round. Orochimaru's plot comes to fruition. Sasuke Uchiha vs Uzaga Hikori. It was a week after the Gaara Jikai Biju fiasco, and all four of the remaining fighters were ready for their battles. Sasuke and the Stone Nin Uzaga stood opposite each other in the arena, while Naruto and Kajika waited in the competitor's box. I've been waiting for this, Sasuke Uchiha. Uzaga said. Sasuke nodded. In fact, I'm the one that saved your ass in these exams. Sasuke raised an eyebrow. I got my grandpa to overturn your disqualification. I wanted a good fight. Sasuke smirked. You'll get one. The proctor appeared between them, arm raised high in the air. Enough talk, he declared. The first semifinal match will now begin. He dropped his hand and vanished. Sasuke made rapid seals. Fire style. Fireball jutsu. Uzaga calmly watched the massive ball of flames rush toward him before pulling out a scroll with the water kanji painted on it. He opened it and dropped it in front of him, made a seal, and stomped his foot onto the seals inside the scroll. Water rose up around him and blasted forward, dousing the fire and making smoke. Nice try, he said. He felt cold steel against his throat. It's called a distraction, Sasuke said condescendingly. Do it, Uzaga dared. Sasuke smirked and brought his kusanagi back toward him, cutting through the Stone Nin's neck with no opposition. The head dropped and the body slumped to its knees. Sasuke brought up a foot and kicked the body square in the back. His foot stuck tight and he could see the body start to melt. He transformed his eyes into the Sharingan and cursed. Mud clone. He spat, trying to move himself from the mud that was slowly engulfing him. Damn it. Chidori current. Sparks burst out across the Uchiha's body and the mud fell off in clumps. Very nice, Uchiha, Uzaga said from behind him. Sasuke whirled, swinging his kusanagi in a wide arc. The Stone Nin bent back, the blade whistling just above him. He placed his hands behind him, propping him up as he flipped his legs up, kicking the kusanagi from Sasuke's hands. He continued the flip, maneuvering himself in the air to catch the sword's hilt. This is a nice sword, he commented. He channeled his chakra and the blade began to glow blue. His chakra burst out around the sword, leaving a sharp coating of wind-natured chakra. Wind style. Kusanagi, he declared jokingly. Nah, I wouldn't do something like that. My attacks are original. He forced more chakra into the blade, flaring the energy around the highly sensitive metal. Sasuke, not knowing what to do, stayed cautiously distanced. Guess I have to come to you. Uzaga smiled. Wind style. Slashing wind scythe blade. He vanished and reappeared past the stunned Uchiha. A slash appeared in the Uchiha's jacket a split second before Sasuke's blood sprayed from his chest and he fell to the ground. Uzaga made a big show of moving the sword like a samurai, sliding it over an invisible sheath and holding it by his side. Don't insult my intelligence, Uchiha. I know that was genjutsu. Sasuke stood back up, smiling. I'm glad you're a worthy opponent. I was afraid one of my last matches was going to be a letdown. Uzaga smiled back. No chance of that. I'm going all out. He ran forward again, preparing the sword for another strike. You caught me off guard with that attack earlier, but you're obviously not trained in kenjutsu. Sasuke noted. I am. The Uchiha easily disarmed Uzaga, getting his blade back. He slipped it into the sheath in his belt loops. I think it's time to fight with our jutsu. He made rapid hand signs and ran forward. His arm erupted in lightning and he closed the distance. Chidori, Uzaga replied with signs of his own before slamming his hands into the ground. Wind style. Updraft. He was launched from a crouch, flying high over the Uchiha's head. He bit his thumb and made a few more seals. Fire style. Summoning jutsu. There was an unearthly roaring and the crackle of flames as the smoke from the summoning began to fade. Flame golem, Uzaga called out. A hand made of flames cut through the smoke, revealing the terrifying form now on the battleground. It was a full foot taller than Uzaga, who was an inch or two taller than Sasuke, and made almost completely from intensely burning, dark red flames. It had claws made of solid, bleached white bones, and in the midst of the flames where the head formed was a human skull. The flames left the skull alone, instead coming up behind the bone, forming a hood of fire. Uzaga smirked and slapped a hand to the creature's back, flames having no effect. Collaboration jutsu, he called out. A breeze began to whirl around him, lifting him a little. Firestorm. The beast brought its hands together, blasting all of the flames from its arms at Sasuke, leaving the bones from under the fire. The flames started to spiral, flying fast at the Uchiha. Sasuke dove to the side, making seals of his own. Summoning jutsu. He brought Biscuit to assist him. Son of a bitch. The dog exclaimed at seeing the flame golem. Then he saw the flames coming at them from the other side, and he slammed his paws together. Water style. Hellfire quench. The small dog opened his mouth wide and launched a large, continuous burst of water that collided with the fire, causing an explosion of mist that covered the arena. Biscuit. What kind of weakness can we use against that thing? Biscuit thought for a second. Well, all the golems have the same weakness. Sasuke perked up. Explain. Well, wind style. Updraft. Uzaga pointed his hands into the mist and moved them around, blowing the cover away. Sasuke and Biscuit were nowhere to be found. He flicked his eyes all around, searching. He looked down at the ground, thinking. Cook 'em, he commanded. The skull under the flames clicked its jaws together sinisterly. It outstretched its bony arms and more fire burst out across the bleached white skeleton. It focused and the flames seemed to pour off its arms, into the dirt. A heat haze made the arena look fuzzy, and waves of warmth resonated throughout the building. The ground was turning a dark red color. Now, Sasuke roared. They burst from the earth in the only spot not heating up. It was a circle about 10 feet in diameter around the golem and its summoner. They reappeared between the two enemies. Biscuit's paws were together again, and he breathed deep. Water style. Hellfire quench. The burst of water sounded like a shotgun as it washed over the golem, putting out the flames. Go, Sasuke. Biscuit barked. Sasuke leapt into the air, easily getting higher than the golem's head, and attaining the perfect strike zone. His arm caught sparks from the dying flames as lightning blasted forth once more. Chidori. His electrified arm shot straight through the only weakness in the golem, its head, reducing it to powder. The bones that made up its body came apart and crumbled into dust. The crowd roared at the amazing display of tactics and power. Damn it, Uzaga cursed. The golem was one of his trump cards. But then he smirked. That was a good show, Sasuke. He complimented. You're quite the shinobi. But so am I. He made seals again before biting both thumbs. Wind style. Summoning jutsu. Earth style. Summoning jutsu. He crashed one palm against the ground, and the other he stuck out in the air. He rose the hand on the ground at the same time that wind started swirling around the other. The wind picked up the dust from the flame golem's bones, bringing it into the form of the new creature. At the same time, the earth was rising with Uzaga's hand. In seconds there was a pillar of earth before him, and a small tornado whirling beside him. HMPH. Uzaga smirked as he squeezed his thumbs, dropping more of his blood into the pillar and the tornado as an offering. The blood ran down the earth in glowing red patterns as it also caused red streaks to pass through the winds. Arise. Air golem. Stone golem. The earth pillar shattered, revealing a crouched figure. It stood, revealing itself to be a stout but broad golem wearing stone armor over its bones. The helmet was in the shape of a demon, but the mouth was a grill, just like a regular helmet, so the skull was still somewhat visible. At the same time, the dust from the flame golem's bones reformed in the winds, becoming the bones of the air golem. The winds howled as they clothed the skeleton in green robes that ruffled ominously in a non-existent breeze. The two stood side by side, the stone golem shorter than a normal man, but far broader, and the air golem was taller than any man, like a willow, but gravely thin. Uzaga snapped his fingers and the stone golem stabbed his thick arm into the ground, pulling out a long claymore blade, while the air golem held out its hand and a metal rod shot up from the ground. Some of the winds pulled away from the specter's robes and formed a constantly shifting blade on the side. The stone golem hefted the claymore over its shoulder and it connected to its back, while the air golem twirled the scythe through brittle fingers, as if testing the feel of a weapon long lost. What the hell are those? Sasuke stared at Biscuit. I didn't think he'd be able to summon more than one. The nin dog explained apologetically. There are 5 in total. One for every element. The flame, air, plasma, stone, and ocean golems. They're powerful alone, but something is said to happen when they're summoned together. Sasuke must have looked worried, because Biscuit continued. However, it's almost impossible to summon all 5. You can only summon one if you have the chakra nature that matches the golem. Sasuke grinned. That means he only has these 2 left. Biscuit nodded. Looks that way. I know what you're muttering about over there. Uzaga called out. And you're right. I can't summon any more of these golems. But I won't need the other 2. He snapped his fingers again and the air golem moved forward, faster than the air that made it up. Uzaga put his hand to the stone golem's armor. Collaboration jutsu. Instead of winds lifting him like with the flame golem, a circle of fire began swirling around him. Meteor. The stone golem lifted its hands and a large stone burst forth from the ground. It caught the rock and fire erupted around its hands. It threw the flaming stone with incredible speed and accuracy. Sasuke was dueling the air golem, sword on scythe, when the meteor blasted through his opponent, nearly dealing Sasuke fatal damage. Biscuit leapt in the way at the last second, taking the explosive attack and disappearing back to his home. Biscuit! Sasuke yelled. He looked to Uzaga, who was panting from using so many jutsu. At least that air golem is gone. Uzaga smiled. Ah, ah, ah. And suddenly, Sasuke felt something sharp licking at his neck. He shifted his eyes down at the green blade that shifted erratically, leaving minuscule cuts on the Uchiha's pale skin. Any of my golems will regenerate, as long as the head isn't destroyed. Sasuke glared at the stone nin. Don't hate the player. Hate the one that sucks. Uzaga laughed. Keep him there. He commanded the air golem. He formed a sign and thrust his arm into the stone golem's armor. He pulled it out, covered up to the elbow in rock. He ran at the Uchiha. Earth style. Crumble fist. He buried his fist in Sasuke's stomach, and the air golem took its blade away, letting the leaf nin slump over its master's fist. Uzaga smirked when he saw Sasuke's blood on the stones and tried to pull his arm back. But it wouldn't move. Sasuke had both hands gripping the attack in a vice. Sasuke's head came up and Uzaga met the gaze of his 3-tomo Sharingan. Like a bear in a trap. Sasuke said with a smile. He blinked hard, enveloping Uzaga's mind in a genjutsu. The stone nin fell to his knees and all the rock dropped from his arm. The golems became still without their master to give them orders. Sasuke pulled out 2 kunai, charging fire-style chakra into the first, and lightning-style chakra into the second. He launched them at the 2 golems, breaking through the defenses and making the 2 dissolve like their third. Now, I've only put you in a simple genjutsu. It should break once I hit you. But, if I hit you right, it won't matter. Sasuke mused. He pulled his kusanagi from its sheath once more. I think it's time to strike the final blow. He decided. That's when he saw the stone nin begin to twitch. Impossible, Sasuke said. There shouldn't be any way for you to move while under the influence of my eyes. He lifted Uzaga's eyelid, and there it was, the imprint of the Sharingan over the stone nin's eye, showing that he was under Sasuke's control. However, when Sasuke looked at the shinobi's chakra with his eyes, it wasn't interrupted like it would be if he was truly under the effects of a genjutsu. Sasuke furrowed his brows, wondering what happened. Transform! Cried the voice of his opponent. The Uzaga in front of him changed shape under form of smoke that was cut away by the wind scythe that narrowly missed the Uchiha. The real Uzaga burst out of the ground where the air golem had been hit with the kunai filled with fire-style chakra. That was me you hit with that kunai. He explained. Since the air golem is so much taller than I am, I was able to take its shape without fear of getting a kunai to the head. He laughed. And since we shifted positions, I was never under any genjutsu. He clapped his hands together. He spread his hands, now holding the dust-style technique from his last match. Throw him. The air golem suddenly had Sasuke in a chokehold, and threw the Uchiha right into the path of Uzaga's technique. The stone nin held his hands out, firing the powerful attack at full speed. Dust style. Atomic dismantling jutsu. The 2 opposing forces met in the middle of the arena. When the transparent sphere touched Sasuke, it expanded, trapping the Uchiha inside. As soon as the small sphere touched him, the inside of the attack exploded with the force of a nuclear attack. All the Konoha people stood, shouting and screaming with anger, fear, sorrow, and a lust for blood. All the stone people stood shouting Uzaga a hero for eliminating the last Uchiha. But one voice screamed louder than all of them. Wait! Uzaga yelled in a voice powered by chakra. The scream continued until everyone was silent. Uzaga cut the yell out. I didn't win. He pointed at his air golem, which shimmered for a moment before revealing Sasuke, who stepped forward with a smile to cheers from the leaf nin and groans from the stone. How do I know this isn't the first time I've actually seen you? Uzaga asked, eyebrow raised. I thought this would be an interesting fight. It's been me the whole time. Sasuke promised. This, of course, pissed Kiba off in the stands. Bastard. They heard his indignant roar over the heads of the silent crowd. The two combatants shared a smile before becoming serious once more. I've only got enough chakra for one more attack. Uzaga said. I know. I can see it. Sasuke said seriously. I have one more in me as well. He promised. They smiled once more before launching into rapid hand signs. Uzaga finished first, but Sasuke continued signing. Earth style. Burial jutsu. He put his hands in the snake seal. Grave. The ground shook under Sasuke's feet and he was sent in the air by a large stone that shot from the earth. A deep cavity opened in the ground under him as he dropped into it, still signing. Uzaga fell to his knees. Cover. He cried hoarsely, clapping his hands onto the ground. The crack closed, sealing Sasuke underground. Rest in peace. You've been one of the best opponents I've ever had, Sasuke of the Leafs Uchiha. He prepared to snap his fingers and complete the jutsu, when a hand shot from the ground, grabbing his ankle. Earth style. Headhunter jutsu. The hand jerked Uzaga's leg, pulling him into the earth. Sasuke broke from the ground a few feet away. Those were good parting words. Sasuke complimented. I'm glad you didn't have to use them though. He smiled. But this fight is over. You're out of chakra, and you can't break free. Uzaga made to argue. You can't fool these eyes. Naruto Uzumaki versus Kajika. The cheering for Sasuke's battle with Uzaga had yet to end, even as Naruto and his opponent took to the floor. Sasuke had just pulled Uzaga from the earth when his eager friend clapped him on the back. That was amazing, he cried. Sasuke smiled at his friend before taking a few wobbly steps to Uzaga. You alright? He asked the stone nin. Uzaga smirked. I'll be fine. That was one of my best battles. The two shook hands and headed for the stairs together. Before they left, both turned to wish Naruto luck. Naruto stared hard at the mist nin. Sasuke had warned him of what Ni had said to him in the preliminary fight. She had mentioned Orochimaru. It was a safe assumption that if her team was with Orochimaru, that Kajika's was too. After all, they'd nearly killed every opponent they had, and were more powerful than most genin. Well, Naruto thought, if they're after Sasuke, they're in for a hell of a fight. Naruto stood in thought for a few more moments, waiting for Kajika to make the first move. Raising water cutter. Kajika slammed his foot on the ground. An arc of water shot from where his foot touched, aimed at Naruto like a cutting blade. Naruto twirled a kunai around his finger before channeling wind chakra into the blade. Then he slashed through the water, making it harmless. Gotta do better than that. He taunted. The shark-like shinobi grinned evilly, showing every pointed tooth. I'll make note of it. He made a single seal before rushing at Naruto. Gonna try close range now, huh? Naruto asked. He charged more energy into his kunai. Bring it. Kajika slid to a stop a few feet away, and Naruto decided to take the fight to him. It was what Kajika was waiting for. Water style. Hand of waves. He thrust his hand out at Naruto, shooting a blast of high-pressure water from his palm. Naruto was hit in the chest and knocked back. Kajika walked slowly toward the soaking shinobi. Better? He asked, while still a ways away. Naruto clambered back to his feet. Better, he acknowledged. He formed his signature cross-shaped seal. Shadow Clone Jutsu. 3 more of Naruto appeared and ran at the mist nin. Kajika made a few more seals. Water style. Black clouds. A small cloud appeared above each clone's head, dousing them. Naruto began to laugh, and the clones followed suit. What's that supposed to do? Give them a cold. Actually, Kajika began as he pulled out a kunai with a paper bomb attached. That jutsu douses an area with flammable liquid. He smiled sadistically as he threw the kunai. It landed close to the clones, who now knew what was coming. Their eyes widened as the explosion burned them away. What was the point of that? Naruto wondered out loud. The explosion itself would have killed them. I made it bigger, Kajika said sinisterly. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Right. He formed the seal once more, making just one clone, who started forming the Rasengan. He placed his hand on it, making it grow. Let's get back in the fight. They ran at Kajika, Who made more seals? Water style. Destruction torrent. He formed a small hurricane in his hand before tossing it to the ground. When it touched, it spun rapidly, growing bigger and meeting Naruto as he ran. Giant Rasengan. The two Naruto cried together as they drove the attack into the twister. Fool, it will only repel you. Kajika laughed. You know what? I learned something from my master. Naruto revealed. And what was that? Trash. Opposite spirals cancel. The attacks dispersed, with Naruto and his clone still flying at the mist nin. The fist clone kept going, crashing his fist into Kajika, knocking him into the air. The real Naruto leapt off the clone's back, and the clone made 3 more. Those 3 slid across the ground as Kajika fell to earth again, each throwing out a leg that sent him flying back into the air. Repel this. Naruto cried as he spun through the air, Kajika sailing up to meet him. Uzumaki barrage. He dropped his combat boot onto the mist nin's face, sending him dropping to the ground like a stone. He crashed into the ground and burst like a balloon, sending water flying everywhere. Damn. Water clone. Naruto landed in the water, unknowingly hitting Kajika's trap. Water style. Water prison jutsu. Kajika reappeared, causing the water at Naruto's feet to swirl up and trap him. Kajika had his hand pressed to the sphere, unable to take it away. Now, to get rid of the clones. He muttered. He made a few more seals. Water clone jutsu. 3 more Kajika formed from extra water and began making seals themselves. Water style. They called out in unison. Ice darts jutsu. They each opened their mouths wide, shooting icy projectiles at their clone counterparts. They dodged expertly, coming together to try and cast a jutsu. They stood in a box formation, each taking a point. One had his back to Kajika. The 3 closest to the water clones started rapidly shelling out chakra to the original clone. A shrieking sound caused the audience to cover their ears as the jutsu formed. The green sphere whirled at an unnatural speed as the glowing blades pulsed. It looked like the attack had been formed perfectly for the first time, and it wasn't even the real Naruto that did it. Let's go. They cried together. The 3 newer clones turned and ran point, while the other clone ran behind them. The 6 clones in front met in the middle of the arena and began to grapple. Each of Naruto's 3 clones channeled their chakra. Shadow clone explosion. They detonated, taking Kajika's clones with them in a massive smoke cloud. The middle of the cloud was blown away when the last clone burst through the cloud with his attack that screamed like a Comanche warrior. Wind style. Rasengan. The clone flew right past Kajika, striking the water prison. Kajika leapt away as the water began to hurricane around Naruto. His clone dispersed, and he stood atop the whirlpool, shaking his watery hair from his eyes and holding another Rasengan in his hand. That didn't last long. Didn't even lose my breath. He boasted. Kajika glared at him. Water style. Water dragon whip. Seemingly without seals, Kajika formed an orb in his hand that shot tendrils of water at Naruto, who leapt from the vortex and rushed the mist nin. He had halfway closed the distance when 3 whips stabbed into him. Damn it, he rasped. Then he casually tossed the Rasengan and disappeared. Kajika's eyes were widening when Naruto burst from the ground, grabbed the Rasengan, and thrust it into Kajika's chest. Fake out Rasengan. At the same time Kajika slammed his orb into Naruto's side. The whip-like tendrils burst out of the back of the sphere, through Kajika's hand, and the tips focused on Naruto like the heads of snakes. They plunged forward, striking at the blonde boy. The 2 fell away from one another, Kajika's shirt and hood torn away, chest a pulpy mess, hand nearly gone, and Naruto with multiple deep stab wounds. Both of them managed to get back to their feet, getting close to unconsciousness. Kajika snapped the fingers of his intact hand and something flew from one of Naruto's wounds. It was a small, blue scale. This, Kajika said, is a scale from Kisame Hoshigaki's Samahata. He said breathlessly. From it, I've been able to make hundreds of synthetic scales, but I have to have the original for them to work. He reached into his weapons pouch, pulling out a hunting knife that looked almost exactly like Samahata, except that it had a handle like a sai. The scale shuddered in Kajika's hand and shot into a bare spot in the middle of the blade. The entire blade began to glow a soft blue, bathing Kajika in the light. It has all the abilities of the original. He whispered reverently. He smiled as the hilt of the knife began drawing into his hand, leaving the blade jutting from his palm. I placed this scale on you at the beginning of our fight. Kajika said. It's been sapping your chakra, and you didn't even notice, because you have so much. His injuries were healing quickly, due to the transfer of Naruto's chakra into Kajika's body. His hand was already healed, and his chest was in the progress. Come now, Jinchuriki. Heal yourself so we can make this a real fight. Naruto bristled at being called Jinchuriki, anger building. Kajika smirked. Naruto let his tenant's chakra flare for an instant, smoke pouring from his wounds as they closed. Excellent, Kajika said. He charged at Naruto once more, leading with his right hand, containing the pseudo-samahata blade. Naruto brought out a kunai, knowing better than to channel chakra into it. Samahata would just absorb it. They met in a clash of sparks and the squeal of the fake Samahata. Naruto broke away to regroup, trying to think of a way to defeat this enemy. Alright, let's try the wind style, Rasengan. He muttered to himself. I'll need some time. He formed the cross sign again. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. 1,000 copies of Naruto appeared to do battle with Kajika as 3 more formed in front of the original. Let's get started, guys. The longer we charge it, the stronger it gets, right? Naruto reasoned. Sounds good, boss. They replied. Naruto's sweat dropped for a second, forgetting that, as clones of himself, they didn't know anything more than he did. Naruto began supplying chakra. The one on the left began forming it, and the one on the right began to infuse the wind chakra. The Naruto in front was actually used as a decoy to protect the attack in case an opponent managed to get close to them. You can't fool me, leaf bastard. Kajika screamed. Water style. Water dragon whip. The Naruto clones were getting destroyed 10 at a time from each whip, and there were at least 10 of them shooting across the arena. We've only got a few seconds left, guys. The decoy shouted. The others nodded, and the original broke away. You guys know what to do. They nodded. The two turned to the decoy, who held out his hands. The two began forming the chakra for 2 more Rasengan. When the spiral spheres were completed, the 2 that formed them lifted them from the hands of the giver, who made 1 more seal before being struck down. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. Then he was struck by a flailing tendril. However, another 1,000 clones appeared. Instead of simply trying to run interference this time, they took to the offensive, rushing the mist nin. Kajika scoffed and began killing the clones once more. Go! The original Naruto screamed as he began to run, Rasengan-toting clones following in hot pursuit. Any clone that could get close was ducking under or jumping over the tendrils of water that were striking out indiscriminately. Only about 4 made it through, but that was enough. The first hit Kajika's arm, moving the orb that controlled the whips, keeping them out of reach. While Kajika drove his Samahata into that clone, dispelling it, the other 3 knocked him forward with powerful strikes, sending him flying at the 3 incoming attackers. Damn it! Kajika cried as the original Naruto leapt high over him. The 2 clones caught the mist nin in the chest as he got close. Double Rasengan. The assault threw him back at the original, who was about to complete the combo. Strike 3. Wind style. Rasengan. The hit was solid against Kajika's back, enveloping him in a miniature tornado that tossed him high into the air, looking like he was done. He hit the ground in the middle of the 3 Naruto with a disgusting crunching noise. Naruto dispelled his last 2 clones, thinking the battle was over. But he was mistaken. What are you doing? Kajika's voice was deceptively steady for someone on the way out. This isn't over. He rose, the front of his body almost completely torn away, but slowly healing from the pseudo-samahata. Kajika gave a bone-chillingly creepy smile as he held up his right hand. Naruto saw the blade of the knife slowly sinking into the healing flesh as Kajika's skin took on a bluish hue. What the? Naruto began. It's time for you to die, Jinchuriki. Kajika rasped, voice becoming deeper. The guttural growl of a killing monster. The only thing not changing about the mist nin's body was his soulless eyes, the tattoos underneath, and his legs. The rest was morphing into something hideous. His head elongated into a long fin, his hair falling out in clumps. Grara, he called. His shoulders split as gills appeared on them leading up his neck. A tail shot from his lower back to curl behind him. His forearms tore, fins snapping out and reaching farther back from his elbows. His fingers webbed and became claws. Water style. Water prison shark dance. A bubble of water appeared around him. At a flick of a fin, the bubble encased the entire battlefield, leaving the spectators outside. Now, I'm unstoppable. Kajika declared. Naruto was holding his breath, trying not to let it out. Kajika laughed a horrible, distorted laugh that sent many audience members into a terrified state. I'm afraid that won't work. This water will be here as long as I am. It's time for you to die. The shark man moved fast as lightning in this water, clearing the distance between them in seconds and leaving no time to counter. I also have all the abilities of Samahata in this form, he cried. Naruto could feel his chakra drain from the touch of the almost demonic Kajika. A light bulb went off in Naruto's head. Demon. He closed his eyes, getting in touch with his spiritual side. When his eyes flicked open again, they were slitted and red. His hair thickened, claws and fangs sprouted, and his whiskers became more prominent. He let out a roar of his own, blasting Kajika and the water away from him. Kajika was weary of getting close again, but the water returned to covering the fox boy. You'll still drown, Kajika pointed out. I'll just wait it out. Naruto smirked, showing his canines. Red chakra bubbled out from all over his body, hissing as it touched the water. It's evaporating, Kajika realized with shock and awe. But he shook himself out of it and charged again, not noticing the three tails flowing behind his opponent. You may be a beast without a tail, but I've got three, Naruto exclaimed. He formed a Rasengan and it pulled water into it. Soon, all the water was swirling. The level was sinking, and both realized that the Rasengan was absorbing the water. Naruto grinned fairly. It's over. Kajika was fighting the current that pulled him toward the death ball, and was cutting a straight path for the Uzumaki. Naruto dropped his chakra shroud, putting all the energy into the Rasengan just as Kajika got in range. Hurricane Fox Rasengan. The attack blew a hole straight through Kajika's shark belly, a wave of spiraling wind and water blowing past him. The wind twisted like a serpent as it weaved around the field before coming back at Kajika's exposed back. It changed, taking the form of a fox with 9 tails, paws outstretched to bring Kajika back to hell with it. There wasn't anything left behind but muddy water along the floor of the arena. The final match was being called, Naruto vs Sasuke, but it was interrupted by the shaking of the arena. Each Jonin stood, taking up sentry posts, as the Chunin set up a perimeter around the civilians, and any other ninja got prepared for whatever was coming up. A huge pair of wings shot from the earth in the middle of the arena, pulling what had to be a massive body of some sort along with it. When the beast finally broke through the ground, it was enormous. It was a gigantic 4-legged beast covered in jagged white armor. In places where the armor had chipped or broke away, you could see swirling black energy. The head was that of a lion, face covered with an orange mask. A green mane flared out behind it and demonic red eyes shone from under an orange unicorn horn that jutted from the mask. Where the mane ended, close to the neck, was the skull of a bird that connected seamlessly to the armor around it. Its wings were covered in the same bony armor, but had sharp, black feathers along the edge. An armored tail whipped around behind it. Halfway down, it separated into 2 trunks, each ending in a snake's head. Standing atop the beast, each with a hand on the spiraling horn, was Ichi, Ni, and San, obviously not dead like everyone thought. With a look to the cage box, the 3 of them sank into the beast's head, taking control. The shinobi from the audience got ready to jump into the arena to combat the beast, but a barrier of water kept them from jumping from the openings into the fray. The only boxes not covered were the cage box and the competitor's box. The windows from the competitor's box shattered and the Konoha 12, plus the Sand siblings and Team Uzaga leapt down. Then the glass from the cage box shattered, revealing Yagura, the Mizukage. Calm yourselves, Genin, he ordered. Kajika landed next to him, kneeling. My lord, I've immobilized the shinobi from the audience, what should I do now? The Mizukage thought for a second. You get Sasuke, he decided. Go all out, but keep him alive. Kajika smiled and made some signs. Gladly. He outstretched his hands and a bubble of water rose up around Sasuke. Naruto leapt in at the last second, both being captured. Kajika snapped his fingers and the orb rose. It followed Kajika as he left the arena. We've gotta follow them, Sakura cried. The Mizukage trained his eyes on her. You'll be too busy dealing with my chimera, he vowed. Just as he said, the chimera flapped its wings, battering the genin below it with gale force winds as it rose up and left the arena. Yagura made a seal and shimmered, before his appearance changed. He was now a white-haired man with blood-red eyes, dressed in an oversized, sleeveless, high-collared coat wrapped with 3 leather straps. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, voice amplified so all could hear. "My name is Hirako. I am a missing nin from Konoha. I was friend to the legendary Sanin. But Konoha betrayed me. I have joined Lord Orochimaru's Sound Village. I have returned to claim Konoha's Kekkei Genkei, so I can be immortal." There were gasps and screams from the crowd, but a woman's voice was louder. "Genin of Konoha." They looked to the cage's box. Tsunade was standing in the broken window, hailing her students. "I'm assigning you an S-rank mission." She pointed at the retreating Chimera. "You are to defeat the Chimera, and protect Iwagakure." The 10 that were left vanished, taking off after the Chimera. "Don't just stand there, Yuzaga," Onoki declared from beside her. "Protect our home." Team Yuzaga nodded and vanished as well. "Let's go," Gaara rasped to his siblings. The Sand siblings disappeared too. "Tsunade, does this mean you're the only one to welcome me?" Hirako mocked. She leapt down to stand before him. "Jiraiya, Kakashi," she roared behind her. The Toad Sage and the Copy Ninja appeared next to her. "Jiraiya, my old friend." Hirako acknowledged. "And Kakashi, just the man I wanted to find. Your Sharingan is the last piece of the puzzle to immortality. You'll never get the Sharingan." Kakashi vowed. Kajika landed in the stone passageway into the village. The bubble of water burst as it touched the ground, releasing his captives. Kajika glared at Naruto. "You're not the one I need." Naruto glared back. "How'd you survive our fight?" "Fool. I replaced myself when I transformed. That's why you had it so easy. I haven't begun to show my true power." "Naruto," Sasuke called. "Let's get rid of this guy and get back to the arena. I think everyone's gonna need some help." The blonde nodded. "Sounds good." He formed a clone, who began shelling the chakra for the Rasengan. Sasuke smirked and formed the seals for the Chidori. They grasped hands and charged. "You think something so slow will hit me?" Kajika cried. But before his eyes the two vanished. Kajika whirled around, searching for his opponents. "Behind you." Kajika turned around to meet the two-leaf nin at close range. Chidori Senri. 1,000 spiraling birds. The assassination jutsu stabbed through the mist nin, releasing the bird-shaped chakra bombs that flew high. The Kajika around their arms turned into a puddle of water, and the two leaves jumped away. The water rose up, forming into Kajika once more. "Water clone," he boasted. He didn't know about the now spiraling bird-shaped bombs that were drilling through the air toward him. He heard the whistling as they got close, and he turned around again. Naruto and Sasuke jumped further back as Kajika all but exploded. "Ha ha." Naruto laughed as he slapped Sasuke on the back. "Don't think I'll be killed so easily." Kajika rasped from the smoke cloud. He leapt high, clearing the smoke, forming hand signs. "Water style. Water snake's mouth." He pointed both arms at the two-leaf nin and the ground rumbled beneath their feet. They looked away from the village, toward the entrance to the passage. A roaring wall of water was bearing down on them. As they watched, the waves took the form of a giant serpent with fangs bared. The snake crashed into them, but they managed to get above it, using chakra to now stand on the raging water. The snake vanished, just leaving a rushing river heading straight for the village. "No," Naruto cried. "We've gotta save the village. You need to think about saving yourselves." Kajika exclaimed. "Water style. Flash grinding destruction." He slammed a hand down onto the water. Nothing happened. Naruto muttered. "Naruto," Sasuke called. Naruto turned to him. His Sharingan was spinning. "Look out." The blonde looked down and was knocked into the air by 4 sharks made of water. Each shark took an appendage in its watery jaws and spread him in the air. The sharks turned red from Naruto's blood. "This is the end for you," Kajika cried as he leapt up, pseudo Samahata ready to stab in the center of the captured boy's chest. "Naruto," Sasuke cried. "Fire style. Phoenix flower jutsu." He spat 4 fireballs, each destroying a shark and freeing the Uzumaki. "Thanks Sasuke," Naruto yelled back. He pulled out a kunai. "Come on then," he screamed. He charged it full of his chakra and threw it at Kajika. "Fool," Kajika exclaimed. He parried the kunai with his knife, sucking out the chakra in the process. He grabbed the kunai out of the air and launched it back at Naruto. "Don't forget about me," Sasuke yelled, appearing in the knife's path and grabbing it. He made a hand sign and the kunai erupted in lightning. He threw it back at Kajika. You're a water nin, so I'd guess you don't like lightning chakra too much. Just try it, Kajika cried, knocking the kunai away. Damn it, he screamed as the lightning was absorbed by the fake Samahata, shocking the wielder. I'll kill you. He raced at Sasuke, but stopped, clutching his head. He began to scream again, as if Sasuke's lightning had entered his mind. Kajika, the mist nin rasped in a very different, very familiar voice. Why would you disobey me? Kajika hit his knees. I'm taking over. We can't have you harming my Sasuke, can we? Kajika looked up at Sasuke and Naruto, eyes slitted in gold. His tattoos had disappeared, replaced by purple marks from his eyes along the bridge of his nose. Hello, Sasuke, Orochimaru hissed. Sasuke took a half step back, but remembered his pride. Ha, I can sense your fear. The possessed shinobi grinned evilly, tongue flicking out, tasting the air. Sadly, I am limited to this fool's jutsu while in his body. But I will claim you on this day, Sasuke Uchiha. Orochimaru forced Kajika's limbs under his will, making hand signs. Water style. Ice darts jutsu. He spat the attack, albeit much more powerful and with more of the icy spikes than Kajika could ever utilize. Sasuke stepped up. Fire style. Fireball jutsu. He exclaimed, unleashing his jutsu to melt the ice. The ice melted, but hidden in the darts were kunai that stabbed into the Uchiha, causing him to fall back. Water style. Destruction torrent. Kajika's arms shot out, both releasing a shotgun blast of water that crashed into Naruto, knocking him away. Water dragon whip. The tendrils picked up Sasuke, lifting him high into the air. Time to go, Sasuke. Orochimaru laughed. Haha, you'll have to do better than that, Tsunade. Hirako roared with delight as he dodged another of the Slug Princess's super-powered punches with his swift-style ninjutsu. Tsunade, this is crazy. Jiraiya exclaimed. Let me try. He made a few seals. Earth-style. Dark swamp. He placed his hands on the ground and the area under Hirako turned into a pit of dark red mud. Hirako laughed. Good, but not good enough, my old friend. He stripped the bandages away from his left hand, revealing two overlapping squares tattooed on the palm. Dark style. Inhaling Ma. The top square glowed, sucking the swamp under him into it. Kakashi and Tsunade gasped, but Jiraiya wasn't surprised. You're still working on that jutsu, aren't you, Hirako? The white shinobi laughed uproariously, crazily. Working on it. I've perfected it. With Kakashi's assimilation, I'll be perfect. Immortal. He thrust his palm at the three ninja. Dark style. Judgment. The bottom square glowed, releasing blue flames that forced the three legendary ninja to put distance between themselves and their attacker. Hirako make more hand seals. Storm style. Thundercloud inner wave. They caught one last glimpse of the half of Haruko's they could see before his body expelled black clouds that obscured him from view. The clouds crackled and sparked erratically. I'll take care of this, Kakashi said, lifting his headband from his eye. Sharingan. He made seals and held his hand out. A circle of lightning cracked around him, sending sparks up to his hand. He took off with enough speed that the ground behind him tore. Get back, Kakashi, Tsunade roared. A blast of lightning came from the cloud, intent on striking Kakashi down. The copy ninja lunged, letting the shot go right past as he continued to attack. However, when he got close, the clouds let out a wave of lightning that propelled him away. A glow came from the heart of the cloud, sucking the lightning off of Kakashi's arm. There was a sudden break in the clouds, and Kakashi felt something flash past him. Jiraiya looked down and saw Hirako crouched, holding lightning in his hand. Lightning blade. He rasped and thrust the attack into the Toad Sage's stomach. He pulled his arm out, lightning still flaring, and whirled, slashing his hand across Tsunade's stomach. Tsunade grabbed his hand and delivered a massive punch that cracked Haruko's neck and sent him tumbling back into his clouds. He'll be out for a minute, she said, bending to heal Jiraiya. Extreme tempered ultimate attack. Shukaku's pike. Gaara roared, throwing the spear at the giant chimera. It was made of hard-packed sand, and had blood-red symbols on the four-pronged blade. Like the name, ultimate attack, it hit the beast's armor, sticking deep into the monster's body. It screeched in pain. In its thrashing, the chimera had already demolished several buildings, and most of the village. It flicked its wings trying to keep aerial, hitting the large tower in the middle of the village, destroying it. Hey! Yuzaga cried out from the sidelines of the battle. That's the Tsuchikage's building. He thought for a second. Damn it. That's my building. This isn't the time. Jikai berated him. We've gotta kill that thing. Yuzaga made a face before stepping toward the battle. I'm going out there, he said. I'm not gonna hide here. Gramps said to protect the village. He glared at Nicolette, who had pulled him and his cousin here just after the fighting started. He took another step and she shot her hand out, grabbing his hand. It's dangerous. I'm trying to protect you. I'm the next Tsuchikage. I'm not gonna die here. He told her with a smile. He let go of her hand. I'll be back. He looked to his cousin. Let's go, Jikai. The redhead nodded. There you are, Stone Nin. We have been looking for you. Lee said as he landed next to them. This chimera creature is a most powerful opponent indeed. He was still bruised from his fight with Naruto, and probably shouldn't have been fighting, but there was no telling the handsome devil of the Leaf Village. Yeah, we're here to fight, Yuzaga declared. About time, Kiba exclaimed as he sailed through the air, crashing into the rubble of a broken building. He came out in his tunneling Fang Jutsu, streaking toward the creature once more. It hasn't even used any techniques yet, Neji said incredulously. All this damage is just from it rampaging. He ducked. Byakugan activated, as Choji came flying past in boulder form. He bounced against the ground, ricocheted off a wall, and flew back at the beast, growing bigger and bigger. The wall he hit fell over. Cha! Sakura's voice sounded as the wall split before hitting the ground. Sakura had delivered a powerful punch to keep the wall from crushing her, Ino, Hinata, and Shikamaru, who was laying in the dirt with Ino and Sakura pouring chakra into him. There were multiple black feathers sticking out of him. Damn, Yuzaga muttered. He had a lot of respect for the intelligent Leaf Nin. Yo, he called out in an amplified voice. All the genin looked to him, and he motioned them over behind another wall. Choji landed and gingerly picked Shikamaru off the ground. Alright, listen, we're not going about this the right way. Yuzaga said. We've gotta do this right, or there won't be a village to save. This is my home. What do you suggest we do? It was Neji. We need a plan, Yuzaga said. You're no Shikamaru, Ino said. Yuzaga raised his eyebrow. I'm pretty smart in my own right. Now, I've been analyzing you Leaf Nin. He turned to Gaara and his family. And you Sand Nin. And I think I've got the most powerful players right in my head. Jikai and Gaara, front force. You two are Jinchuriki, and the strongest of us here. Okay, I trust you, Yuzaga. Jikai said. He looked to Gaara, who nodded imperceptibly. Okay, Yuzaga said. You guys, he pointed to Sakura and Ino. Stay here and heal anyone that gets wounded. Both of them nodded. He looked to Shino. Protect them. Right, they said together. You, he pointed at Choji. Keep throwing yourself at the thing with that jutsu you were just using. He pointed to Neji and Hinata. Keep him bouncing back with your rotation technique. Every time he comes back, I need you two to send him back with twice the power. Like a cannonball. Right. Right. Yuzaga nodded. He looked at Kiba. I want you and the dog to keep using Fang over Fang. Keep circling back, but look out for him. He pointed at Choji. Kiba smirked. Got it. Right, Akamaru. The dog barked. When the time comes, he pointed at Lee, Neji, and Hinata. You three need to strike from above, hitting it with taijutsu. Aim for the head. What about us? Kankuro asked, pointing to him and his sister. From what I've seen in the battles, your attacks won't work on such a big opponent. He said to Kankuro. He looked at Tamari. And you can't use your wind jutsu and not hit everyone on our side too. They looked down, but nodded. I'm sorry, Yuzaga said sincerely. What will you do? Gaara asked quietly. I don't want to seem conceited, but I'm one of the strongest shinobi of this group. However, I can't frontline fight on the level Jikai can, or even Gaara. They outclass me. He looked to Shikamaru, who was laid out unconscious. She was right. He pointed at Ino. I'm no Shikamaru, but I'm guessing he's the guy that usually commands you all. The general, am I right? Everyone nodded. Yuzaga sighed. I have to watch over you all, and make sure my plan goes right. That's a cute plan, three voices said together. The shinobi on the ground stiffened, realizing they hadn't heard the sounds of destruction in quite some time. They looked up to see the chimera floating above them with Ichi, Ni, and San emerging to the waist from the creature's head. It's a shame it won't work. The bony armor that covered the wings cracked away, revealing the rest of the black feathers. They all shifted, pointing at the group. Oh! Uzaga looked back at the others. Take cover, he screamed, just as the feathers began to fire. Sasuke! Naruto cried out. Sasuke was dangling in the air from Orochimaru's water dragon whip, and was struggling to escape. He flicked his eyes at Naruto, discreetly setting him in genjutsu. Go help fight Hiriko, he commanded. I can do this. Naruto looked up at his friend, dazed. Fine, he said dully. If you're sure. He turned and leapt away. Orochimaru began to chuckle. Using genjutsu on your friend to make him leave. That's not very nice. But, maybe this means you've decided to let me take you. He said hopefully. Sasuke glared. You'll never take me. He unzipped his jacket and let it fall, not wanting to tear it apart. I just didn't want Naruto to see what I'm about to do. There were 2 holes cut in the back of Sasuke's mesh shirt. Orochimaru morphed Kajika's facial muscles into a gross bastardization of a smile. You know, the curse mark will bring you to me. He gloated. Even if you defeat me with it today, you'll never stop the power. Sasuke glared at him. Maybe. But now's all I'm worried about. Black flame markings spread across his skin, and a purple chakra exploded around him, bursting the tendrils away and dropping to the ground. The markings grew, covering his skin in black that faded to gray. His hair turned blue as a black shuriken mark blossomed on his nose. The hand-shaped wings stretched out from the holes in Sasuke's mesh shirt, giant fingers flexing. You want me? Come get me, he snarled, jerking the kusanagi from its sheath. Kajika grinned maniacally before racing forward at the Uchiha. You asked for it. He made seals. Water style. Sort of draining. He held out his hand, forming a mirror of Sasuke's kusanagi from water. He flicked the blade, sending drops flying. You know, subconsciously, you're taking after me, Sasuke. Kajika hissed as they began dueling. Oh, Sasuke growled. The kusanagi is my signature weapon. Orochimaru declared. Except I use the original. The sacred blade. Both blades we wield are shoddy imitations. The snake Sannin was a far superior swordsman, and was keeping Sasuke on his toes. Little did he know that Sasuke was just biding his time, channeling energy. Their blades clashed once more, and they stood at a stalemate. It was Sasuke's time. Lightning style. Kusanagi. The blade screeched as sparks danced down the metal. They leapt from Sasuke's sword to Kajika's, lighting the Mist Nin's body up with electrocution. Kajika hit his knees and Sasuke moved away. The Mist Nin looked up and glared hatefully into Sasuke's Sharingan. It's time for me to leave. Orochimaru's voice rang out. I sense things aren't going well with my associates. Sasuke's eyes caught the change in Kajika's chakra, but was unable to defend from the resulting explosion that claimed the shark-like shinobi's body. Right as Sasuke was commanding Naruto to leave, Uzaga was shifting the rock from his body. The black feathers had enough power to pulverize stone, and had brought another building down on top of the genin. Uzaga quickly surveyed his troops, searching for someone who could fight. Akamaru was digging Kiba out from under some rubble, but a rock pillar lay across his legs. He was useless. Lee's bandaged arm was all that poked out from a large pile of rock. Blue light shone under it and the stones were blown away. Neji stepped into view, feathers sticking out of him. He carried Hinata over one shoulder, a feather sticking from the center of her chest, digging deep, and Lee over the other. Once his cousin and teammate were safe, he dropped to his knees and shifted to the ground. Uzaga looked in the other direction. Choji had gone to protect Shikamaru and the girls, stretching his body and attracting a mass of feathers that had put him out of commission as well. Ino and Sakura were still conscious, but paralyzed with fear. Shino was battle-ready, but wouldn't do much good against the threat of the Chimera. Tamari and Konkuro had vanished from view, but Gaara was standing with a wall of sand in front of him. Hundreds of feathers were embedded in the shield, but Gaara was untouched. He couldn't see anyone else, but could feel Jikai's aura behind him. He turned to see an orb of flames that had burned the feathers away before they could get close. Well, it looks like it's just us three, he said with a hopeful smile. Jikai almost made a reply, but his eyes widened, staring behind him. Uzaga whirled, seeing the snake-headed tails pointed straight at him, both mouths wide open, with a spinning snake thorn ready to fire. San's voice rang out from the beast. This is for earlier. The first shot fired, moving with incredible speed. Uzaga tried to move, but his leg wouldn't respond. He looked down, seeing a black feather sticking out of his thigh, just above the knee. He wasn't going anywhere. He froze, never facing certain death before. But he didn't have to face it now either. A body leapt in front of him, arms outstretched as she sailed through the air. The projectile hit the stomach, just under her breasts, and blew straight through the other side. The interference was enough to make it soar past Uzaga's ear, burrowing into the dirt behind him. He stared as the body impacted right beside him. Nicolette. The girl smiled up at him despite the fist-sized hole in her abdomen. She reached up with trembling fingers and plucked the feather from Uzaga's leg, washing healing chakra over the wound. With his mobility regained, the distraught shinobi picked her up, holding her close to his body. Why? He asked, trembling. He was numbly aware of Jikai moving in front of them to ward off more attacks, with Gaara providing cover from a longer range. She kept smiling, putting a hand against his cheek. I had to save you, she rasped, still smiling. He smiled back, sadly. She looked like she was going to say something else, but her eyes were blank now. Uzaga clutched her closer, thinking back. She really cared about me. He realized. No, I'm not just realizing it either. I knew it, and I ignored it. I pushed her away as I pushed myself to get better. I never did anything for her, and she sacrificed herself. He placed her body safely behind him, knowing nothing else was going to happen. He was finally going to protect her. Get back, he roared. Jikai stumbled, looking back at him. He saw the fury in his cousin's eyes and stepped away, watching over his fallen teammate's body. Uzaga's face was a mask of rage, and pain, and hurt, and he clenched his fists as he screamed to the chimera. Why did you come to my village? My city, my home. Tears of rage dripped down to the rocks below as laughter from the three inside the beast echoed across the valley. Please, what are you when compared to legendary shinobi like Lord Orochimaru? The voices rang out together. Uzaga clapped his hands together. Bright light shone from around his hands as he separated them. It was the dust-style technique from before, but it morphed as Uzaga held it in one hand, close to his face. It illuminated his resolve as the transparent sphere vanished, leaving the shining core floating above his palm. I'm a protector, he screamed. From now on, this place, the people, my teammates, my family, and my friends, I'll protect them all. He pointed his hand at the creature. And from now on, you'll be the dust that blows through the cliffs of my home. He vowed. Dust style. Particle cannon. He unclenched his fingers, splaying them as the sphere vanished and instantaneously reappeared in front of the chimera. It alighted onto the beast's horn and expanded, encasing them in the light. Then there was nothing left. Uzaga kept glaring at the spot where the beast caused so much pain, then clutched his chest and fell to the ground. Hiriko had been dominating the fight for as long as the fight had been going. He'd stripped his coat away, as well as the bandages covering his chest, arms, and face. He was a scary-looking individual, badly scarred from so many operations on his own body. There were scars all across his chest, and an empty space in the middle that he said was reserved specifically for Kakashi. We've gotta do something, Jiraiya exclaimed. We can't, Kakashi cried. He can absorb anything we throw. Hiriko grinned ghoulishly, stretching the threads that held his mouth closed. He looked like a child's worst nightmare, or a demonically possessed scarecrow. The light began to dim, and they all looked to the sky. Hiriko grinned wider, straining the threads close to the breaking point. It was an eclipse. This is what I've been waiting for. This is what will make me invincible. Come Kakashi. Give me your eye. Hiriko raised his arms and the bandages he'd shed rose up with him, glinting with the shine of a blade. Slashing bandages. The strips of cloth stabbed and arced and slashed, causing the three powerful shinobi from the leaf to duck and weave and dodge until they were pressed up against the wall of the arena. They saw someone drop into the center of the field and wondered if the walls of water were gone, letting backup come. However, they saw it was Naruto. Jiraiya knew he had to get Naruto to do something stupid. That kid's stupidity had gotten him out of so many situations that he'd learned to count on it, and to rely on it. Naruto, he shouted. Hiriko whirled just as 2,000 perfect copies of the blonde ninja appeared, keeping the real one hidden. Jiraiya continued as if it hadn't happened. Remember the jutsu I told you not to use, unless I told you. Naruto furrowed his brows at his trainer, wondering why he'd want him to use such a suicidal attack. He refused to question it though, trusting the pervy sage's wisdom, and the fact that he'd never ask his pupil to use the attack if it wasn't life or death. Got it, pervy sage. The mass of clones struck out, rushing at Hiriko to provide a distraction, while 3 clones stood at Naruto's side. They each took their positions and prepared to do their parts. These clones won't stop me, Hiriko vowed. Dark style. Judgment. The evil blue flames roared as they washed through the ranks of the clones, obliterating half of them in one go. Slashing bandages. He began cutting individual clones down with sadistic pleasure with his razor-sharp bandages. They're not what's meant to stop you, Naruto cried. This is. The shadow that had passed over the sun slowly vanished and the light shone directly onto Naruto, leaving the powerful genin looking like a battle-hardened veteran. It also accentuated the sphere in his hand that he held toward the sky. It was a bright blue, like his eyes, and had 4 piercing white blades spinning around it. It shrieked even louder than its parent jutsu. Try and absorb this, Naruto cried as he charged. Slashing bandages, Hiriko exclaimed, aiming the attacks at the original, running like a kamikaze to what was surely his death. Clones leapt in the path of the bandages at every path, halting the threat to their creator. Naruto kept closing in. Dark style. Judgment. Hiriko blasted more flames as he prepared to meet his final opponent. Clones died, and a chain of smoke filled the arena for an instant, before getting whipped away from Naruto's attack. Hiriko began running, shakily at first because of his spindly legs. Swift style. Shadowless flight. He screamed as he all but vanished. He raced circles around the blonde, who was now halted in the center of the raging scarecrow. I'll kill you, you worthless brat. He skidded to a stop in front of Naruto, who took the initiative in bringing the attack toward its final destination. You're the only one without worth. Wind style. Rasenshuriken. Hiriko brought his palm up just in time, absorbing the attack. Naruto's face fell, and Hiriko prepared to kill the blonde with his own attack. You were saying, he snarled. He held out his hand, trying to form the attack again, but he stiffened. What's this? He demanded. Naruto wasn't sure what he was talking about, but the white nin was starting to glow. No, this can't be. I'm perfect. Kakashi, who could see everything that was going on in the despicable human's body, explained. There is no perfection in the shinobi world. Or in any world. Hiriko glared at his would-be absorption, but screamed as blue lights broke out along his body, slashing him like miniature blades. A massive explosion racked the arena, throwing Naruto across the field and through the wall on the other side, and bringing the other wall down on Kakashi and the Sannin. When the smoke cleared, there wasn't anything left of Hiriko but a singed circle of earth and the echoes of his last scream. Chapter 8. Rescue. Akitsuki rising. Thankfully, amazingly, none of the fighters that took on the Chimera had perished in the collapse of the building that fell on them. All of them were on stretchers being checked out by medics, except Gaara and Jikai, who hadn't suffered any injury. What's the word? Jikai asked a passing medic. He was asking about his cousin, of course. It's not an easy diagnosis. I healed his body, no problem. But there's something wrong his mind. He's suffered some kind of trauma, and won't wake up. The red-headed Jinchuriki looked to one another, one's face falling into a sad frown, the other still the same sad frown he'd worn since childhood. Damn it, Jikai muttered as the medic walked away. He, of course, knew what trauma his cousin had suffered, and was affected by it himself. They'd lost a teammate, but Uzaga's coma was brought on by his extreme guilt for ignoring Nicolette's affections while she was alive. But Jikai was proud of his cousin as well. Though he was in pain, his proclamation that he was a protector showed Jikai that the cocky shinobi had finally adopted the right attitude to become Tsuchikage one day. It will be all right, Gaara said, awkwardly patting Jikai's shoulder. The Jinchuriki was still trying to get the hang of human interaction. Jikai nodded appreciatively. Sasuke had yet to be found, but Naruto held out hope. He'd heard one of the rescue teams talking about an explosion in the entrance path to the village. Naruto had been fighting there with Sasuke against Kajika or Orochimaru before Sasuke forced him to leave. He was sure his friend had escaped the snake's clutches and was caught in the explosion. He skidded to a stop atop a pile of rock that had fallen from the cliffs. There was a patch that sparked, showing Naruto that he was right, and also showing him the position of his fallen friend. He formed his seal. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Each Naruto began throwing away rock and digging through dirt to reach the Uchiha. Not long after the fighting ceased, Tsunade and Jiraiya left Iwa for Konoha to check on the village and to increase their defenses. So the medical staff was short one extremely powerful medic. This left Sasuke in a bed next to Uzaga's in the Iwagakure hospital. Every other team had already made their way to their respective homes, leaving Team Kakashi and Team Gaara the only foreign teams in the Stone Village. Sasuke was healing well, and quickly, but would still need a few more days. Gaara's team stayed behind so that the red-headed Jinchuriki could get in a few rounds with Naruto. However, they too soon had to leave. "I'm fine," Sasuke insisted. Sakura wouldn't listen to the Uchiha, continuing to run diagnostics checks on him, one right after the other. She was starting her fourth one in the same 10-minute period when Sasuke sent a small spark throughout his body. He and Naruto laughed as Sakura was shocked into sitting back down. She looked over at Uzaga, who was still out. It had been a week, and yet there was no change. Nicolette's funeral had came and went. Thankfully it was just her funeral. Thanks to Kajika's barrier keeping all the spectators out of the fight, Nicolette was the only casualty. "I'm worried about him," Sakura said. Sasuke rolled his eyes. "He's fine too. He's fighting against something inside himself, and once he wins he'll be back." Whatever Sakura was about to say in return was interrupted by the entrance of Jikai, Roshi, and the Tsuchikage. "This is sad," Onoki muttered to himself. He wasn't looking too good health-wise. The toll of his grandson's predicament laid heavily on his soul. Roshi stayed quiet, looking somber. Jikai sat down next to his cousin's bed, preparing to speak. Sasuke got off his bed, disconnecting wires and ignoring Sakura's protests. He motioned for them to follow, and the three-leaf nin exited the room. "I know how hard this is for you," he started. "But this has gone on long enough." Roshi stared at his son, about to speak, but Onoki cut him off. They both stayed silent. "Yeah, this has been horrible. It affects us both. But you can't honor your promise by laying here in a hospital bed like an invalid. You can't be a protector like this." He stood up and walked past his family, leaving the room. The leaf nin stood outside. "Jikai." The redhead brought his eyes up from the floor to stare at the Uchiha. "He's gonna be fine." Sasuke's eyes slipped into the Sharingan. "I can see it." Jikai was right, Uzaga. Onoki said quietly. "You've always been a protector, whether you realize it or not. That's why you're going to be the next Tsuchikage. Not because you're my grandson. It's time to wake up." He tapped Uzaga's forehead. The young shinobi's eyes shot open and he sat straight up in the bed, gasping for air. 6 months later, back in the village of Konoha, Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, Shikamaru, Kiba, Neji, and Lee had been promoted to Chunin. In Gaara's village the three Sand siblings were all Chunin as well. And in Iwa, Uzaga and Jikai were also promoted. The rebuilding of Iwagakure was still in progress, but was being finished rapidly by the many Earth-style users in the village. More missions were being sent their way to help with the process, and things were peaceful. But that was about to change. 2 figures walked through the cliff pass leading to the village. One was tall, the other squat and round. The second wasn't walking, so much as shuffling. Both wore identical black cloaks, covered in clouds, and a straw hat on their heads. The tall figure looked very effeminate, with one visible blue eye and long blonde hair. The other's face was mostly obscured by a scrap of cloth. "Welcome to my former home, Sasori, my man," the taller one said. A strange, almost nostalgic smile graced his face. Sasori sighed heavily, sounding like a rasp. "Wipe that grin off your face, Deidara. We're here for the organization, not for reminiscing." "I know why we're here, my man," Deidara said indignantly. "Then stop fooling around. I hate to keep people waiting." Sasori growled. "This is your village, so this is your target." "Yeah, I know the Jinchuriki was Roshi. But he went and had a kid when I was little." Apparently, the 4 tales got passed from Roshi to the kid. He stopped and looked at his partner. "Did you know that could happen?" Sasori looked back at him. "Quit wasting time with questions. We've got to go." "You mean I've gotta go, my man? You should wait here. I'll be quicker by myself." Sasori glared at him. "Just don't keep me waiting." Deidara was flying high above the buildings on a great white bird. He stayed high enough so that no one would see him here. He was surveying the land with a hidden scope over his left eye. They're not even trying to set up a guard, he said incredulously. They're completely focused on rebuilding. He was positively giddy with this information. What he hadn't told Sasori was that he knew his target. He was 2 years old when Roshi had his child, Jikai. Being in favor with the old man himself, Deidara had played with Jikai and Yuzaga when he was a child. He'd love to sever his ties to this village completely with this one final act before he never came back. The thought brings a smile to my face, he said, smirking. He slid his hands under his cloak, into the bags at his waist. He opened his hands, palm down, and a mouth opened on each one. A long pink tongue stretched out and dug into the white clay in the bags. Yuzaga and Jikai were knocked to the ground as a massive explosion racked the village. Followed by another, and another, and another. The old man was still weak from the ordeals at the exams, and the two Chunin cousins were pretty much the village's defense while everyone else rebuilt. The two ran through the city's streets, looking for the source of the disturbance. They ran right past an odd-looking white spider, crawling over the rocks. They stopped, looked at each other, and then the spider. I've never seen a spider like. Jikai was interrupted by the spider detonating, proving to be one of Deidara's bombs. The two were enveloped in the explosion, not having time to defend against it. The buildings around them were blasted away, undoing a month of their work. That was easy, Deidara said as his bird alighted on the ground. A little too easy. I was hoping for a challenge. He laughed. The rocks started to shift as one of the victims stood. Yuzaga moved from under the rocky covering, battered and scraped. He stared, wide-eyed at Deidara. Good to see you too, Yuzaga, my man. Deidara smirked crazily. He thrust his hand out at the dust user, spitting a glob of unmolded clay right onto the boy. Now, you have a choice. I can blow you sky high, or you can stand down and let me take Jikai. Yuzaga glared at the former Iwanin. Screw you. He stabbed his arm into a broken building beside him, before running at his former ally. Crumble fist. Deidara smirked again and ducked under the arm coming straight at him. He slammed both palms into Yuzaga's chest, mouths open. Fire style. Burning pressure. Flames blasted through the mouths in his palms, sending Yuzaga flying back, jacket on fire. He crashed through several buildings before coming to a stop, unconscious. Deidara shifted through the rubble in front of him, grabbing Jikai's coat in his mouths and pulling the boy up. Good. You're not dead. He threw the boy to the bird, who swallowed him up to store him in its stomach. Deidara climbed back aboard the bird, taking flight once more. Several minutes later Yuzaga blinked heavily, sitting up. He looked down at his jacket, which was only singed. Thanked Kami for fireproofing, he muttered. Then his situation caught up to him, and he stood shakily. I've gotta get moving, he declared, running for the village entrance. He passed many of the workers, and the shinobi, of the village who were either buried in the explosions, or killed. But he couldn't stop. He was this village's protector, and as such, he had to take down the one who caused so much strife in his home. That didn't take any time at all, Deidara. Are you sure you found the target? Sasori rasped. Hey, trust me, my man. I've got who we're looking for. It's time to get to the hideout. The two of them took their time making their way through the passage. Deidara had set up 50 bombs of various size to detonate at their own pace, spacing out so that the villagers thought the bombing was still going on. By now, Deidara knew they knew it was him that attacked, but they'd be too preoccupied to give chase. They were getting close to the end of the passage, and would head off to their closest hideout, when they felt someone approaching. What the hell, Deidara? I thought you were keeping the villagers busy. I am, my man. I don't know who this could. Wait a minute. They stopped just as Yuzaga came into view. Damn it. I thought I took care of him. Deidara muttered. Deidara, Yuzaga screamed. He slid to a stop, panting heavily and ready to get his cousin back. Do you know this maggot, Deidara? Sasori said with a chuckle in his voice. Yes. Deidara sighed. He's an old friend. His smirk never left his face. Can you take care of this, my man? Sasori looked at him. Can't kill an old friend? He asked sarcastically. I blew him up, my man. Twice. I can kill him easily. I just need to get moving. You're the one that hates keeping people waiting. Besides, I've already wasted too much of my art on this hellhole. Please, Deidara, those little bombs of yours aren't art. Art is meant to be lasting, Art should be a fleeting moment. Deidara interrupted. Yuzaga could tell this was an argument the two had more than once a day, and he was feeling a little ignored. Hey, bastards! They looked to him angrily. Give me back my cousin, and get the hell out of my city. They looked at each other and started to laugh. Sure, Deidara, I'll handle your little problem. Thanks, Sasori, my man. Deidara turned to Yuzaga. I guess this is goodbye, He took flight once more, leaving the other two behind. Get back here, Deidara! Yuzaga screamed. He made to run after the blonde Akitsuki member, when a metal tail shot out from under Sasori's cloak. It had a wicked point that was inches from Yuzaga's face, stopping him in his tracks. You're not going anywhere. Hey, then I guess introductions are in order. Yuzaga said, crossing his arms in an X over his chest. I'm Yuzaga Hikori, next Tsuchikage of the Stone Village. I'm gonna get Jikai back. Sasori laughed. I don't like to keep people waiting. Introducing myself is just going to waste time. Time you don't have. His tail pulled back a little, before shooting forward and wrapping around the stone nin. The tail began to squeeze, taking the air from the teen's lungs and putting strain on his bones. Sasori flicked the tail, sending Yuzaga crashing into the cliff side. I've got nothing but time, Yuzaga said as he staggered to his feet. Earth style. He began, clapping his hands together in the snake seal. Fisher. He stomped the rock and the ground began to crack. The crack stretched across the earth toward the squat Akitsuki member. Sasori dove to the side, dodging the earth-style ninjutsu. Yuzaga heard the sound of rapid firing, and saw the cloth over Sasori's mouth get blasted off by hundreds of Senbon needles shooting out. What surprised Yuzaga the most was that Sasori's head was the head of a puppet. He put his hands into the monkey seal. Wind style. Updraft. He soared into the air, flying over the needles and setting on course for Sasori. Then he cut off the air, and made another monkey seal. Wind style. Slashing wind scythe blade. He slashed a hand, and a blade of wind bit deeply into the puppet that was Sasori. No pain was felt, and all that happened was that Sasori's cloak and hat were shredded, revealing the puppet body. It wore regular shinobi clothing, but its lower back was completely covered by an orange shell that took the form of a mask. The scorpion tail protruded from the mask's mouth. His left arm was normal till the elbow. From there it was metal, shaped like a torpedo, with wooden dowels sticking out of it. Its puppet face was tan, and angry looking, and its hair was done up in cornrows. Got you. The puppet's jaws clacked as it punched out with the torpedo arm, causing Yuzaga to fly back. Puppet style. Prosthetic arm needles. The wooden dowels shot from the torpedo arm, flying toward the airborne Yuzaga. The wood split apart, revealing thousands of Senbon that stabbed into the stone nin from every angle. That's the end for you. I've laced your body with enough poison that you'll be dead in minutes. He saw Yuzaga getting to his feet. Even less if you keep moving. Yuzaga smiled, and his face cracked. Bits of rock began to fall away from him, covered in Sasori's needles. Earth style. Stone armor jutsu. Yuzaga explained. No needles got anywhere close to me. Sasori was mildly impressed. You utilize many different jutsu in a very short time. You would be a worthy opponent, if I could take my time. Don't worry about it. Let me just show you my trump card, and you can be on your way to hell. I wonder if Sasori's finished up little Yuzaga yet, Deidara thought aloud. He was flying through the mountains, and now entering the forests that surrounded the peaks around the stone village. What he didn't know was that he was going to need to worry about himself soon, for there was something interesting taking place on the inside of his bird. Jikai came to on the lip of a massive volcano. He stood and looked around, only seeing the massive, volatile mountain. There was nothing else around but blackness, but he could hear the lapping of water far below him. It was a place he'd been to before. Four Tails. Why am I here? A roar answered him. Helpful as always. Jikai muttered. He jumped over the lip of the volcano, no fear of burning in him as he landed on a metal grate 15 feet down. The grate was intricately made, and if looked on from above, it was made in the shape of the kanji, seal, inside a circle. Jikai sat in the very center and began to meditate. The smoke from the volcano vanished and he was able to look down. He stared into the eyes of the four-tailed demon ape. The four tails was massive, obviously, with green skin. Red fur sprouted out across his entire body, except for the hands and feet, the chest and stomach, ears, and the face. Its forehead was covered by a yellow plate that led up to horns. Its eyes were yellow, with a white pupil. There were rocky spikes that protruded from its four tails. Its canine teeth were long, but were broken. They were darker colored at the ends. I don't appreciate what you did at the exams. This statement is what got the four tails speaking for the first time. That wasn't my fault. The deep, growling voice sounded like it was pouting. It was that damn Shukaku. If his host could have controlled him better. That's no excuse. If I could control you better, it wouldn't have happened either. The four tails glared at him. Fine. I brought you here to curse you for eternity for getting us into this. We're going to die here. Jikai's face fell. I know. I wish there was something I could do, the four tails scoffed. PFFT. No human would ever help a demon like me. Don't make your last words lies. Jikai bristled. I'm no liar. I want to save us both. I've always wanted us to be cordial. I wanted to make the best of our situation. I want to be your friend, Four Tails. The beast's fist impacted against the grate, sending Jikai tumbling. The world can't be changed by pretty words alone. He roared. And I hate being called Four Tails. I'm the king of the sage monkeys. I was created by the sage of the six paths himself. He gave me a name. Maybe things would be different if your father wouldn't have forgotten it. My father didn't forget your name. He told me he was too arrogant to use it. He thought he was better than you, but he realized he was wrong. He said he was better when the two of you were sealed together. It made him realize that persecution isn't the answer. That's why he's helped me so much. Oh, did he? The Four Tails smiled malevolently. He was putting on a show by this point. He had some modicum of respect for this boy now, and a great deal for his last host. If he's helped you so much, then what's my name? If you think you can call me by my name, I'll give you access to all my power to use as you see fit. As partners. Fine. Then in attempt to save us to fight another day, I name you once more. Fight with me, Son Goku. Sasori laughed at the young nin. You'll send me to hell. I'd like to see that happen, boy. Uzaga smirked. Okay then. He slammed his hands together and drew them apart, a sphere floating between them. What's that? Sasori asked, intrigued. This is power passed down by my grandfather. And I'll pass it to future generations. This is the dust style. Sasori laughed again. That may be, but you won't live long enough to use it on me, much less pass it on. The puppet sent its scorpion tail at Uzaga's stomach, meaning to impale him once and for all. The tail moved so fast that Uzaga almost couldn't keep up with it. He lowered his hands, putting the sphere in the tail's path. Dust style. Atomic dismantling jutsu. The sphere traveled a short distance from his hands before the tail hit it. There was a clicking sound as the tail disconnected from the puppet. The orb expanded, destroying the deadly instrument. Sasori's eyes widened. I wasn't sure what would happen, but I didn't expect that. The older man rasped. I'm full of surprises, just like that one. Oh, Sasori was definitely intrigued. In that case, I'll let you live, and maybe we'll fight again someday. Oh, no, you aren't leaving with me still alive. And you're not gonna cheat me out of a good fight. Sasori smiled. You'll be alive, and I'll be leaving. I'll knock you out with one of my weaker poisons. But a high dose. I can't have you coming after me again. Then I'll have to kill you. Jikai's eyes snapped open inside Deidara's clay bird. His entire body shook as he placed his hands into a set of seals. Lava style. Molten armor. He called out in a deeper voice. What the hell was that? Deidara wondered. The clay beneath his feet began to heat up, starting to melt the soles of his sandals. Damn, he's awake. Deidara leapt off the bird, quickly forming another one before making a hand seal. Ha! The bird that held Jikai exploded in a corona of flames. Deidara landed safely on the new bird at a lower altitude. Some of the flames from the explosion broke away and dropped quickly at the blonde missing nin. I'm coming for you, Deidara. Jikai screamed. He stretched a fist out as he passed, clocking Deidara in the chest and knocking him off his bird. Both of them landed in the trees, starting a fire. Deidara crash-landed and immediately ditched his flaming cloak. Bastard, he muttered, looking for Jikai. He found the boy just as he leapt for the blonde. In mid-leap, Jikai transformed. His skin peeled away, leaving the blood of Son Goku. The blood of the beast. One tail flowed behind him. He bowled the Akitsuki member over, burning him further with the demonic chakra. Urgh! Didera cried out. He put distance between the two and began to formulate a plan. At least I'm dealing with a mindless beast, he said. That thing has no control. The beast seemed to smile. That's where you're wrong, Didera. It said in a mix of Jikai's and Goku's voices. We've teamed up. We're partners now. Didara's smirk vanished for a moment. Then he began to laugh. So what? I'll still take you out with a bang. Jikai began to growl. Droplets of water and blood began to slowly separate from the beast's body. They formed into a large purple sphere before compacting into a sphere about the size of a large super ball. Jikai opened his mouth as the ball started to descend toward him. His jaw dislocated with horrible cracks to accommodate the sphere. He swallowed it and his body began to swell. The ground cracked underneath him as he swelled bigger and bigger before he opened his mouth. All the energy he had been holding in was released with a scream. Demon style. Biju ball. Jikai roared. The energy fired in a beam that flashed through the forest so fast that Didera could make no move to dodge. The beam cut through the missing nin like a hot knife through butter before impacting on the ground and exploding. A large part of the forest was turned into a crater, but the fires had been put out. That was impressive. Jikai whipped his head around, looking for the source of the voice. It belonged to the man he'd just killed. But a member of Akitsuki won't die so easily. Didera burst from the ground just under the spot where he'd been standing before. A combination of my earth style, hidden mole jutsu, and my clay clone. He said smugly. It's a shame this little partnership didn't give you any more brain power. Jikai's eyes widened. I'm the king of the sage monkeys. My intelligence is limitless, he called out, Goku taking over for a moment. White bones burst out of his body, forming a skeleton over the blood vessels. Didera laughed again, seemingly undaunted by the threat of a two-tailed Biju. I thought you had control over the beast, Jikai. If you lose control like that, you'll be burning everything to the ground. Hopefully, I won't die here, no matter what you do. Uzaga cried, rushing Sasori. He jammed his arm into the rock wall as he passed, covering it rock. Earth style. Crumble fist. Sasori laughed lowly. I like your spark, kid, but it won't be enough. Puppet style. 8 needle waves. He opened his mouth, and with a sound like a machine gun, began firing rapid waves of Senbon at the running dust user. Gotta do better than that. Uzaga called, moving his arm around in front of him. The needles caught in the rock, protecting the stone nin from the poisonous needles. He leapt up, dodging another spray, and brought his fist down on top of the puppet's head. He heard it crack, and jumped back. You cracked one of my favorite puppets. Sasori's voice had changed from a deep rasp to a soft, almost sarcastic voice. The bottom jaw of the puppet was gone, and a large dent in the top obscured both eyes. Uzaga was pretty happy with himself, until he looked down at his chest. 3 Senbon poked out of his jacket, 3 inches under his heart. They dripped purple poison and red blood into the dirt below him. Ow, he muttered, feeling the poison moving through his blood. I told you, Sasori began. I said I'd poison you. You should really stop moving, before you die. Uzaga pulled the Senbon out, placing his hand over the wound. He staggered over to the wall. Blood spewed from his mouth and he had to use the hand he covered his wound with to hold himself up. He dropped to his knees, hand sliding down the wall leaving a trail of blood. Why you, bastard, Uzaga gasped. Then he grinned as his blood began to sink into the stone. Summoning jutsu. There was a cracking noise from above, but Sasori couldn't see through the eyes of his puppet. A shadow passed over the rocks as Uzaga's stone golem tossed itself over the edge of the cliffs above. It landed in a crouch on the puppet's back, crashing both large fists down upon the mask on the back. The whole puppet started to crack as a shadow leapt from the shattered puppet. The golem thrust his arm into the ground and whirled around, pulling its giant claymore from the dirt. It went to swing it, but was stopped by a bright blue thread of chakra pulling on its arm. Very nice. The soft voice from before said. I wasn't expecting you to have a puppet. The man stepped into the light. He looked young, with wide brown eyes and short red hair. He wore teal-colored nail polish and was dressed in another Akitsuki robe. He wore his ring on his thumb. Blue strings stretched from his fingers to various places on the stone golem. Damn it. I know about you puppet users. I don't control my golem anymore. Uzaga muttered. He was on his last legs, close to unconsciousness. Sasori smirked. I haven't been myself in 20 years. He stared at the remains of his puppet. That was one of my favorites, Hiriko. He looked back to Yuzaga. I don't know your motivation, but you are an impressive fighter. If you don't stand down now, you won't live to see tomorrow. He warned. Yuzaga knew he was right, but couldn't fail his cousin. He wouldn't let another team member die when he could have done something about it. But his body wouldn't respond. Sasori moved his fingers expertly, and the stone golem walked to its master. It threw a punch, dropping its master to the ground. It disappeared in a cloud of smoke. I have respect for you. No one has ever destroyed Hiriko beyond repair. I want you to survive, so I'm going to give you the antidote. Sasori spoke to his opponent's knocked out body. He reached into his robes, pulling out a stopper-ed vial of antidote. He stuck a syringe through the cork, drawing the right amount into the instrument. He turned Yuzaga over onto his back, thrusting the syringe into his abdomen, just under the puncture marks left by the Senbon. Don't make me live to regret it. He left the pieces of Hiriko behind, as a little souvenir of his accomplishments during their battle. He didn't win, but he impressed Sasori of the Red Sand enough to live through the fight. The fight with Deidara wasn't going too well for Jikai. He was attacking with everything Goku was giving him, but Deidara was a master of tricks and deception. Every time Jikai would land a fatal attack, he'd get blasted back from the clay clone exploding. He couldn't keep using his Biju ball, because he was reducing the forest to craters. It looked like the moon. He couldn't use his lava-style jutsu without burning everything down. That didn't seem to bother Deidara though. Jikai, Goku's voice echoed in his mind. You have to give me full control. You have to trust me. Our two-tailed form isn't enough. I promise, we'll fight together, but I have to take over. Jikai pondered, mindlessly dodging bombs thrown by Deidara. Fine. Jikai's body went on autopilot for a second before Goku took over. The beast roared and muscle exploded around him, covering the blood and bones as a third tail sprouted. Goku morphed Jikai's mouth into a ghoulish grin. I'm sorry, Jikai, but I don't care about this land as much as you do. I have to go all out. He ignored Jikai's protests as he weaved clawed hands into seals. Lava style. Scorching rocks jutsu. Goku opened Jikai's mouth, spewing a blast of lava that solidified into multiple boulders covered in lava. Meteors. They spread out, leaving it hard for Deidara to be able to dodge. In response, the blonde missing nin sent out multiple bombs, one for each meteor. Ha! He screamed, detonating the bombs as they collided with the meteors. They cancelled each other out, igniting the forest once more. Goku made Jikai smile again. I guess I just have to take this to the next level. Another tail appeared and red fur grew out over the beast. Son Goku stood in all his glory, taller than anything around him but the cliffs. He reared on his back legs, beating his chest and roaring. There we go. Deidara smirked. He formed some seals before spitting out some clay he had been molding from both palm mouths. He combined it, kneading it into shape. He threw it, making another seal. The bomb burst into smoke, transforming into a large-scale version of the original. It was a large dragon with a long, segmented tail. This is one of my specialties. The C2. Deidara announced proudly, leaping aboard the huge clay monster. He formed a seal and 3 segments of the tail sucked back into the other segments. The dragon opened its mouth, launching the 3 segments separately. They transformed into smaller versions of the same dragon. Go! Cried the Akitsuki member. The dragons flew straight at Goku's mouth. The demon grinned before opening his mouth wide. He had no tongue, just a hole in the back of his mouth. The hole opened and Goku spewed lava all over the bombs. But, instead of detonating safely away from the beast, the bombs collided with the king of the sage monkeys. The detonations sent the demon sprawling through the trees. Let's knock you out quick. He formed the seal again, sending out 3 more dragons. The original's tail was getting dangerously short now, hopefully meaning Deidara only had a few shots left. Goku stood, waiting for the bombs to close in before jumping up over them. However, instead of them impacting against the ground, the 3 dragons swung around and struck Goku from behind. He was sent into the trees once more. This is too easy. I thought I was fighting a Biju, but it seems like I'm fighting a regular monkey. Goku's eyes snapped open once more, this time a burning red. You son of a bitching prick. I was given name and power by the sage of the six paths long before you or anyone in your family had been a thought in Kami's head. I will burn you and that dragon with the acid of my stomach. And then you'll burn in the deepest pits of hell for the atrocities you and your organization have committed. And I'll be there too, because of committed unspeakable acts. I'll torment you for all eternity. He slammed his palms onto the ground. Lava-style secret demon jutsu. Flower fruit mountain. He bellowed. Molten lava burst up from the ground in a massive wave that went to crash down on top of Didera and his dragon. Didera took flight, finally a little worried and trying desperately to escape the burning death. Damn, I'm not going to get out of this without some quick thinking. Didera acknowledged. The C2 dragon doesn't have enough tail segments to make a hole in the flow. I'm going to have to sacrifice another part of the dragon to make a large enough hole to escape through. I can't use the wings. He made a seal and the last 3 segments retracted into the dragon. The legs also drew in, and the dragon's mouth swelled up with the size of the bomb it was about to release. Go! Didera cried once more. The dragon blasted its smaller version directly into the wave. Didera turned the dragon and flew after the bomb, detonating it a few dozen feet from himself. The lava was blasted outward, providing just enough space for Didera to escape. Just Didera. He threw another clay figure through the hole before jumping through himself. After forming a seal, he was once more flying high above Goku atop a clay bird. Damn it. I know how to fix him. I hoped I wouldn't have to use it though. I won't have much clay left. Not to mention chakra. Regardless, he dug his hands into his clay pouches and sucked in large amounts of his precious clay reserves. Where is that pest? Goku screamed into the night. High above him, hiding in the clouds, Didera finished work on his last attack. He turned his scope to the highest setting to see his target clearly before dropping and activating his bomb. It was a teardrop-shaped statue with arms crossed over its stomach. When Didera activated it, the statue began to grow quickly. It began to spread its arms out. When Goku finally looked up at the descending bomb, it stretched its arms out fully. It detonated just above Goku's head, hitting the Biju with the full force of the explosion. When the smoke cleared, Goku was no longer there. In his place was a rapidly falling Jikai, heading straight for the bottom of the massive crater that was left by the blast. Didera flew down at top speed, his bird opening its mouth to gobble up Jikai once more. When Didera alighted upon the ground once more, Sasori walked out of hiding. That was an impressive fight. He commented. Didera just stared. What the fuck happened to Hiriko? A week later, Uzaga was still reeling from his failure to save Jikai. When the villagers found him, he was still unconscious. He was brought to the hospital, but because of the antidote Sasori had given him, there wasn't much for them to do. They kept him for observation, but when he woke up in the hospital, he realized what had happened. He went wild, nearly destroying the entire wing of the hospital before the doctors could knock him out again. He was placed in a straitjacket, and contained. He wasn't crazy, but he kept trying to escape to track the Akitsuki members that took Jikai. He'd yet to tell anyone about Didera being part of the attacking group. It got so bad that Onoki had to step in. Uzaga was in a rage when he entered. Damn it, old man. Let me out of this thing. He continued to scream for several minutes, and Onoki was happy to let him do so. When he stopped to take several gasping breaths, Onoki slapped him, sending him flying to the wall. Calm down, boy. Uzaga stared at him. I already put the word out to the other hidden villages. If the Akitsuki appear again, we'll be ready to send a team to assist. But you need to realize that Jikai is gone. Uzaga began to retort, but Onoki cut him off. Jiraiya mentioned it before he left. With Jikai, Gaara, and Naruto in the village, he wasn't sure if the Akitsuki would try anything. He told me all about his intelligence gathering. The Akitsuki is capturing Biju for the sole purpose of extracting them and resealing them. You may not know this, but when a Biju is extracted, the host, the Jinchuriki, dies. Uzaga's eyes widened, but he didn't say anything else for a moment. Gramps, Onoki looked at him. What is it, Uzaga? The boy trembled as he looked back up at his grandfather. It was Didera, and a red-headed puppeteer. They're the ones who attacked the village. Actually, that was Didera. We guessed Didera had something to do with it. We saw the fires from the village, but we couldn't leave. Uzaga looked confused. Fires. Jikai transformed. We think he lost control and transformed to get more power to beat Didera. From the massive craters left behind, Didera went as far as to use the C3. Whatever Jikai was using, he was doing it well. Didera had to pull out all the stops without killing Jikai. I knew he wouldn't go without a fight, Uzaga said fondly, voice shaking. The one you fought was Sasori of the Red Sand. He's from the Sand Village. Like Gaara, Uzaga looked at his grandfather again. So, if Didera came here to capture Jikai, then, maybe Sasori is going to Suna to capture Gaara. He exclaimed. Onoki nodded. I'm glad you picked up on that. I've already sent word to Konoha, but the messenger hawks can't make the flight to Suna. It's too far away. But, I'm sure that Konoha is sending a message, and a team. Uzaga shook his head. That's not acceptable. I've gotta find Didera. I've gotta kill him for this. Onoki nodded. I thought you'd think that way. Which is why I asked Konoha to message back when they were sending a team to Suna. I said you'd be going as backup. I just got the message. Uzaga smirked. You rule, old man. You won't be going by yourself. Oh, damn. Uzaga muttered. Don't tell me. Akatsuki and Kuritsuchi. Son of a bitch. In Konoha, we've received word that Iwagakure was attacked by the Akitsuki just days ago. They kidnapped Jikai Hikori, the Four-Tails Jinchuriki. He was attacked by a missing nin from Iwa, and was accompanied by a missing nin from Suna. The Tsuchikage had reason to believe the Akitsuki was going to target Suna next. Your mission is to go to Suna and give extra protection to their cage. Tsunade said to the four shinobi in front of her. One bounced in excitement. Who is it? Who is it? Naruto exclaimed, showing an immature side that he tried to keep locked down. Is it somebody I know? He was freaking out. My god, Naruto. Shut up. Sasuke laughed. Kakashi stared exasperatedly at his student, and Sakura tried to resist the urge to drag her blonde friend from the room. All three of the other members of Team 7 were amazed at how stupid their friend could be sometimes. There was only one person in Suna who would be a target of the Akitsuki, but Naruto still hadn't connected the dots. Calm down, Naruto. Suna just named him Kage. I'm not surprised you don't know about it. Know about what? Naruto was about to leap from his seat if he didn't find out soon. The new cage of the Sand Village is Gaara of the Sand. Tsunade announced. Naruto's eyes widened before he disappeared from sight. The others turned to the corner where Naruto was sobbing loudly, curled in the fetal position. What the hell, Naruto? Sasuke said. Pull yourself together. Naruto stood up, exaggerated tears still falling down his face. If Gaara gets to be Kage, why can't I be Hokage? In Iwa, come on, little brother. A smug voice called out. Uzaga walked out of the Tsuchikage's building with a sour look on his face. He walked with his hands in his pockets, kicking the rocks out of his way. There were plenty of rocks. The voice that called out belonged to Uzaga's older sister, Kuritsuchi. She was a pretty 18-year-old kunoichi with black hair and pale pink eyes. She wore the clothes shared by most Iwa nin, a red uniform that was missing the right sleeve. She wore fishnet tights with a skirt over them, along with the standard brown flak jacket the Iwa nin wore. She wore regular shinobi sandals along with gloves. Come on, Uzaga. We've got a rendezvous with the Konoha shinobi in 2 days. Then we head to Suna. This second voice belonged to Akatsuki, Uzaga's brother. Akatsuki was the Tsuchikage's main bodyguard, along with Kuritsuchi. That meant both would be passed on to Uzaga once he took over. Akatsuki was cool, and the younger boy looked up to him, figuratively and literally, but Uzaga couldn't wait to be able to order his older sister around. Akatsuki was a massive man, 2 feet taller than Uzaga. He had dark eyes and black hair that spiked out the back of his bandana-like forehead protector. He had big cheeks and a large nose. He wore the regular Iwa nin uniform as well, with both sleeves intact under his flak jacket. He also wore a yellow scarf around his neck. Uzaga met them at the gate before tugging his backpack straps higher up on his shoulders. They took up positions beside their future leader and the three of them walked out of the village. Maybe for the last time. Chapter 9. Stone, Sand, and Leaves. A new bond is formed. 2 days later, is that them? Akatsuki asked. He had his hand above his eyes, keeping out the setting sun as they leapt from tree to tree. They had entered the forest the day before, just before making camp. They came upon Team 7 at the edge of the forest before it became sand. It was getting dark, and they were making camp. Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura sat around a campfire, with Kakashi patrolling. That's them, Yuzaga said. He sensed the familiar chakra associated with Sasuke Uchiha, having fought the boy in his exams match. They landed in the clearing, attracting the attention of the four-leaf nin. Sasuke and Naruto stood quickly, and Kakashi reappeared in the clearing. Sakura was first to notice who had joined them. It's the stone nin, she said. Naruto cocked his head, looking them over. Yuzaga slapped his forehead. He was further back from his siblings, and was in shadow. He stepped forward and Naruto recognized him. Oh, he exclaimed with a smile. He and Sasuke moved forward to clasp hands with the dust user. We're all sorry to hear about Jikai, Sakura said, joining her teammates. Yuzaga's eyes hardened, and Sakura was taken aback. Kuretsuchi glared at the leaf nin, nearly intolerant of the partnership they were utilizing. Another reason why she would probably never be Tsuchikage. She was too much like her grandfather, untrusting in other villages and nations. However, in recent years, Onoki had changed his views. Kuretsuchi hadn't. Akatsuki, on the other hand, smiled jovially at everyone. He was easy to get along with. And who are your companions? Kakashi asked, eye crinkling, showing his smile. These are my siblings, Kuretsuchi and Akatsuki. I didn't know you had siblings, Naruto said. Akatsuki smiled again. We were guarding grandfather during the exams. We weren't supposed to be seen. I guess we did a pretty good job. He laughed. Sakura and Naruto laughed with him, but Sasuke and Kuretsuchi seemed to stare down. Yuzaga and Kakashi watched with trepidation, wondering what would happen. So this is the Uchiha, the older girl said. Sasuke's eyes narrowed a little, but his posture stayed the same, coolly aloof. I couldn't see you very well from the cage's box, but you don't look like much. Just another pretty face, Kuretsuchi said with a condescending smirk. Are you really the one that beat my baby brother? Sasuke smirked too, eyes switching to the Sharingan. Would you like to find out? Kakashi stepped forward, placing a hand on the Uchiha's shoulder. Now, enough of that. We need to work together here. So, he turned back to the fire and sat down, motioning for everyone to join him. Tell us everything you know about the pair you fought. Yuzaga nodded and the 6 younger shinobi took places beside the copy ninja. Akatsuki sat on one side of the silver-haired man, still nearly as tall as anyone standing. Sasuke took Kakashi's other side, with Naruto beside him. Yuzaga sat beside the hyperactive shinobi, leaving Sakura a space on the log to sit beside him. She did, feeling slight discomfort at being separated from her team, and being so close to Yuzaga, who she didn't know very well. Kuretsuchi took up a place opposite Kakashi, on the other side of the fire, sitting by no one. The leaf nin simultaneously cocked an eyebrow, eyes on the kunoichi. Don't worry about her, Yuzaga said seriously. She's just a little antisocial. Doesn't play nice with others. Akatsuki stifled a chuckle, and Kuretsuchi glared at her brothers. Kakashi sighed. This wasn't going well. He motioned at Yuzaga to begin. Right, well, I don't know much about Jikai's battle, but I know it was fierce enough to change the landscape. The leaf nin looked worried. If a battle with the Akitsuki could change the maps, then they were truly powerful opponents. Yuzaga felt the need to reassure them that their task wasn't impossible. A lot of that change came from Jikai's opponent, Deidara. He's a missing nin from Iowa, and uses explosions as jutsu. He was a friend of mine and Jikai's before he defected. However, he continued, most of the damage came from Jikai. He transformed. Naruto's eyes widened a little, being able to guess the scale of the battle just due to that fact. Transformed as in, Kakashi prompted. Yuzaga made a noise of assent. He went full-on Biju transformation. All 4 tails. Kakashi looked troubled. And he was still defeated. I'm not sure what happened, Yuzaga admitted. I was in the middle of my own battle. He looked to Kuretsuchi, hoping she would help him in explaining. She sighed, before beginning to speak. The 4 tails is called the Yonbi, or the demon ape. He uses the lava style, like our uncle, Roshi, and like me. It uses earth and fire style chakra to form intensely burning magma, which is what caused a lot of the damage. When our scouts went out, after we recovered Yuzaga, they reported that the 4 tails was nowhere in sight, but that there were 2 figures there. When Akatsuki and I arrived, the scouts were dead, and there was no one around. I didn't know it at the time, Yuzaga spoke up again. But that other figure was Sasori of the Red Sand. He's a powerful puppeteer from the Sand Village, which is why we figured he'd be going to Suna for Gaara. He uses poisons as well, and he's very good at combat. He took control of my stone golem without even blinking, the dust user thought for a moment. Thinking back on it now, if I was a little faster, I could have fought longer. Things could have been different, you would probably be dead. Akatsuki finished for him, always the practical one. Yuzaga's face fell, and he hung his head. Akatsuki stood, crossed in front of Kakashi, and placed his hand on his little brother's shoulder. That's not to say that I don't believe in you, he said encouragingly. I believe that it wasn't your battle to win, and I think you had the wrong opponent. Yuzaga looked up, craning his neck all the way back to look into his brother's face. He knew what the mountain of a man was implying. Deidara. Yuzaga nodded, silently thanking Akatsuki for his words. After a few more moments catching up and getting everyone up to speed, the shinobi retired to their respective bedrolls for the night. They might well have had a big day when dawn came upon them. Yuzaga laid awake for at least an hour after retiring with the others. He kept thinking about everything that had been happening in this last 8 months. Then, he thought further back. There was something he didn't mention to the Leaf Nin. Kuretsuchi would have killed him for it, so he kept it to himself. He didn't entirely trust his older sister with going after Deidara. It was a long time ago, but she had a really big crush on the explosive Nin when they were little. She was devastated when he left, and wasn't sure whether her attraction to the traitor had faded. Feeling that he'd probably die the next day if he didn't get some sleep, he forced himself to rest. It was filled with the fitful nightmares of someone who knew death was approaching. The only problem was that he didn't know for sure who death was coming for. The next day, we'll be in Suna in the next hour or so, Kakashi declared, voice carrying back on the wind to the shinobi behind him as they leapt through the trees. They had left just before dawn that morning, and hadn't stopped for hours. It was now an hour before sunset, which was their estimated time of arrival. They each had a ration of food pills that kept them topped off on chakra and energy, and could go for hours more if they had to. Luckily, they didn't. The shinobi were going in a formation, with Kakashi leading, Naruto and Sasuke right behind, Akatsuki, Kuretsuchi, and Sakura behind them, and Yuzaga at the end. This way, their most powerful fighters were first to get attacked from either in front or behind, with supplementary help coming from right behind, in front of them. Yuzaga heard Kakashi's proclamation, a grim look coming to his face. I'm coming for you, Deidara. He vowed silently. Outside the sand village, Deidara sneezed suddenly, the sound like gunfire in the silence of the pair's surveillance. Damn it, Deidara. Sasori cursed. He was still in his true form, not having another puppet he could hide in. He had replaced his cloak. The blonde scratched the back of his head with a smile. Nothing I can do about it, my man. Somebody must be talking about me, Sasori said nothing else, instead opting to keep his eyes on the entrance to the village. They'd only been waiting for a short while, but Sasori was already feeling annoyed. First, that brat friend of Deidara's had destroyed Hiriko, and now his mind slave was keeping him waiting. Both of which entertained Deidara to no end. When he first told the blonde what had happened to his puppet armor, the explosive shinobi burst out laughing. Sasori nearly killed him there. But, he wasn't one of the more composed members of Akitsuki for nothing. He stuffed the emotion down, keeping his cool and leading the way back to his former home. Hey, my man, isn't that your guy? Deidara pointed to a lone figure walking from the village. Sasori smiled as the figure drew closer. Ah, Yura. The black-haired man bowed low to Sasori, remembering who he really was once his master lifted the memory-blocking jutsu. My lord, I know of the perfect way to get the two of you inside the walls. Sasori pondered for a second. Very well. Led on. First, Yura made some seals. Deidara made to stop him, but Sasori blocked the way. Yura couldn't do anything that Sasori wouldn't allow, so he knew there was no way the jutsu he was about to cast was a harmful one. Ninja art. Undetectable concealment. He placed a hand on both shinobi's heads and Deidara felt as if something gooey was dripping from his scalp, all over his body. What the hell? He muttered to himself. He looked down and saw his body rapidly disappearing from sight. Interesting, he thought. Sasori really knows how to pick his servants, Come. I told the other guards that I would investigate the source of the noise we heard moments ago. Deidara could feel Sasori's eyes boring into him, even though he couldn't see them. Deidara laughed silently, following the sand nin between the sheer rock walls that guarded the path into the village. Nothing to worry about, Yura said to the other guards. I'm going to report to the cage. They all nodded, and continued to watch. In Yura's 4 years as a council member, he had been appointed to many positions. This included captain of the guard. Yura raced through the sandy space between the walls and the village, and at his first opportunity, he jumped onto a building. This was so that Sasori and Deidara wouldn't bump into anyone, or throw up any sand that would be noticed by someone. In a matter of minutes, the three were standing on the top of the Kazekage's building. Yura was smooth-talking the guard when a gust of wind whipped sand up past them. At first, Yura thought nothing of it. However, the guard gasped. As the sand blew past Sasori and Deidara, it caught on their cloaks, making them ruffle, and briefly outlining them. Yura didn't hesitate, lashing out with a kunai and ending the guard's life. That was close, Deidara said. Sasori was livid. Yura might have just ruined their cover. He could have placed the guard under genjutsu, and it would have been undetectable. However, Yura was still useful. For now, Yura used some sand from his flak jacket to clean the blood away from him. They stepped over the body, entering the building. In the Kazekage's office, Gaara sat at his desk in a high-backed chair. He turned the chair away from his paperwork, staring out the large windows. It was nearing sunset, and the Jinchuriki found that it was his favorite part of the day. He hadn't realized what a tough job being Kazekage would be when he accepted. But, if it was to gain the trust and friendship of his people, he would do anything. It was all thanks to that orange-clad leaf shinobi. He was roused from his musings by his brother entering the office. Gaara. Kankuro bowed. I've told you before, Kankuro. Gaara said, turning back to the desk. You're my brother. Don't bow to me. Kankuro straightened. What news do you have? Tamari sent a message from the Leaf Village. Her mission as ambassador is going well. She said she has some drafts for treaties that she'll bring when she comes home in the next few weeks. Gaara nodded. What are the shinobi coming from Iwa and Konoha? Kankuro pulled out a scroll. Kakashi from the Leaf sent this to us this morning. They said they'd be here close to sundown, so they should be here soon. Very well. Who are the final people they decided to send? Kankuro consulted the scroll again. Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura from the Leaf. Uzaga and 2 others from the Stone. Gaara nodded again, somewhat pleased to hear that he would be among friends. He got along well with Naruto, due to their mutual situation. He also felt some kind of kinship with Uzaga because of Jikai, and he had a feeling he didn't quite understand the feeling he had that the Stone Nin was coming to help prevent something like that from happening to him. Is this gladness? He wondered. Kankuro had been silent for a few moments, but broke his vigil with an unsettling question. Gaara, is that blood? At the word, Gaara could feel the shukaku within him stir. He forced the tanuki to sleep once more, turning the chair back to the window. He immediately saw what his brother noticed. A dark red tract of blood went down the length of the window from the roof above. The guard, Kankuro exclaimed, rushing to the door. He threw it open, running headlong into Yura. Lord Kankuro, what troubles you? The puppeteer pushed him out of the way, charging out of the room. You look deeply perturbed, Lord Kazekage. Yura bowed. Gaara's nose twitched, foreign sense triggering one of the abilities bestowed upon him by carrying shukaku. Not many people knew that his sense of smell was as powerful as it was. He knew right off that there was something wrong. His gourd was in the corner, at the rack that held his cage hat and robe. He exerted his will, and it transformed back to sand, mixing with what was inside. At a thought, it shot forward and enveloped Yura, along with the area around him. What's the meaning of this? Yura exclaimed. What are you doing, my lord? Gaara stood, forming a seal with his left hand, and extending his right. Sand burial, he rasped, rotating his right hand, and making a fist. The sand compacted, killing Yura, and hopefully the ones with him. However, in the instant before compaction, thousands of lines, that Gaara recognized as chakra threads, slashed a large portion of the sand away. However, the threads didn't save Yura, reinforcing the idea that the advisor wasn't alone. As Yura died, a red-headed man came into being, seemingly from midair. The threads were sticking out through a black cloak with red clouds, and as Gaara watched, the threads wound back into the cloak. I'm very impressed with your skill, Gaara of the Sand. You are very familiar. Gaara noted. The man laughed softly. So I should be, he said. This was my home at one point, and I don't doubt that my story is told even today. I was called Sasori, of the Red Sand. Gaara's eyes widened by a fraction of an inch, but other than that he showed no response. I see. My brother, the one who left the room before, speaks of you all the time. He's a puppeteer who uses puppets that belong to you. Sasori smiled. So, my work was preserved. He seemed perversely happy with this information. Regardless, I think it's time for you to come with me. I won't be a part of the Akatsuki's plots. Gaara warned. Oh, you were part of the plan the moment you were born with the Shukaku inside you. Sasori stated. My partner, Didera, is set to begin bombing this city from above. If he doesn't see the two of us leave this building in the next 5 minutes, he'll commence the attack. I could just kill you here, and then attack your partner. Gaara pointed out. That's where you're wrong, actually. I'm more resilient than you think. I escaped your earlier jutsu just by using my chakra. You're really not as dangerous as everyone thinks. And, I have more tricks up my sleeve. Gaara thought quickly, knowing he didn't have much time. Very well. We shall leave the city, and then we will fight. Sasori enjoyed the fact that Gaara thought he wouldn't attack him as soon as they were outside, but decided to agree. Yes, we will fight. It's just as well. We can't seal him unless he's weakened. There they are, Didera said to himself. Gaara was walking through the village, gourd on his back and body covered by a cloak. Sasori was leaping from building to building, repeating the path that Yura had led them on. They had separated on the roof. Sasori went inside with Yura, and the blonde had flown into the sky to ready his bombs. He slipped them all inside another pouch on his belt, saving them for if Sasori needed help subduing the Shukaku. He took off in flight, following the two to the far side of the city. Away from the entrance, Gaara used sand to propel himself over the cliffs to the other side. Sasori smirked as the Jinchuriki prepared himself for the coming fight. He leapt from the building he was on to follow the other redhead over, just as Didera flew and alighted on the sandy ground. Gaara immediately tried to ensnare the explosive shinobi, but Sasori held up his hand. Your fight isn't with him. It's with me. He'll make no move to attack, unless I perish. He smiled grimly. But don't think for an instant that it'll happen. Gaara grinned as well, letting his face slip into the familiar insanity smirk. It wasn't real anymore, but it did usually have an effect on his opponents. Sasori was an exception. Please, you think you can intimidate me? His eyes widened, pupils and irises shrinking as his face took on a more shadowed appearance. He made one hand seal and something on his back glowed for a second. Then, he displayed his palms to Gaara just in time for two pipes to extend. I am not afraid of your toys. Gaara rasped. He formed a ball of sand in front of him that steadily began to shrink until it was the size of a marble. It dropped softly into his hand, and he flicked it at the puppeteer. Sand bullet. Nearly faster than the eye could follow, the bullet shot through the air at Sasori. It easily bypassed his outstretched arms, striking him in the chest and throwing him back. Gaara kept manipulating the bullet, causing it to strike him multiple times before he hit the ground. Sasori stood, still smiling. His cloak had several holes in it, but his skin was unmarred. Not a bad technique, but not nearly good enough. Try again, he offered. Gaara's eyes narrowed. His sand flowed above them, forming a cloud. Particles floated a few inches down from the cloud before clumping together into small spheres. Sasori looked up. The sand at the puppeteer's feet rose, clutching him and throwing him into the air. Sand shower. The spheres rained down at high speed, blasting Sasori as he flew up to meet them. Sand coffin. He formed a seal with one hand, holding the other out. His sand squeezed Sasori, containing him. Sand burial. Gaara closed his hand, making a fist as the sand seemed to crush his opponent. He opened his hand and the sand fell away, dropping Sasori to the ground. He landed in an awkward position, arms and legs twisted around and pointing in all different directions. His cloak was shredded, leaving him wearing only a mesh shirt with a black sleeveless shirt over it. That was better, he said. His arms and legs started to move, righting themselves as he pushed himself back to his feet. It's hopeless, Sasori said. You have no chance of defeating me. Without his cloak, Gaara could see that Sasori's body was that of a puppet, and that all his sand was doing was polishing it. A thought suddenly struck him that made him smile. Sandblaster. He thought morbidly. This has gone on long enough, don't you think, my man? Deidara asked. Sasori nodded. I think you're right, Deidara. I can't stand keeping people waiting. He pointed the pipes that poked from his hands at the Jinchuriki. These are my water stream shooters. If Gaara had eyebrows, they'd have furrowed. I can shoot high-pressure water from them, making your sand useless. Sasori declared. To prove his point, he let a stream shoot across the distance between them. Gaara's sand shield automatically came up to protect him, but the blast punched a hole through it and soaked the cage. Gaara dropped to one knee as the sand armor that coated his body grew heavy with moisture, turning gray. You can't defend yourself against my water stream shooters. Sasori taunted. Your sand is useless here. Gaara struggled to stand, making Sasori softly laugh. His laughter cut off as Gaara took to his feet again. I'm stronger than I look, he said. His sand began to wrap around him, struggling to stay together. This sand shone brighter than originally, because it used the hardest minerals from the earth. The sand focused around his hand, forming the shaft of a spear. A larger amount of sand appeared at the end of the shaft, forming into a spearhead in the shape of a large clawed hand. Red markings, that looked suspiciously like blood, spread out over the blade. Extreme tempered ultimate attack, Gaara called. Sasori's eyes widened even more. Shukaku's pike. He reared back, flinging the pike with all his strength. It moved fast, but Sasori was pretty quick himself. He pointed his shooters at the ground, utilizing a blast of water to lift him high over the attack. He flipped, planning on a safe landing. However, Gaara was in the air too, and was blocking Sasori's route. Sand wound itself around Gaara's hands, forming large gauntlets that the Jinchuriki used to pound the puppeteer to the ground. His hits are harder since I made the sand wet, Sasori mused. I'll just have to make it wetter. Gaara had used the time between Sasori's impact and the man getting up to put space between them. Sasori pointed his shooters at the cage again, firing another blast. Ultimate defense. Shukaku's shield. Gaara screamed. More of the mineral-enriched sand from the ground around them rose up in the form of a miniature Shukaku that stood 3 times as tall as the Jinchuriki. It wore a round hat, much like the hats the Akitsuki wore. Blood-red markings, like the ones from the spear, spread around the Shukaku's arms and swollen belly. The water hit the shield and pounded 2 dents in the sand. However, both the water and the shield kept up. The sand slowly turned gray, like Gaara's, but it held. I said, ultimate defense. Gaara said dryly. You won't be able to break through this shield with those weak jets of water. Sasori's smile grew. He looked down at his arms, and Gaara's gaze followed. For the first time, Gaara noticed the lines that went around Sasori's forearm. Like it wasn't fully attached. Sasori's arms rotated, and the streams condensed. They drilled further into the sand, but it was still holding, for the moment. Sasori rotated his arms again, and the streams were now as thin as a regular pen. They burst out the back of the shield, grazing Gaara's shoulders and blasting through the sand armor. Gaara's blood splattered the ground behind him, and Sasori became the 3rd shinobi to make the Jinchuriki bleed. Gaara. Kankuro rushed back into the Kazekage's office, only seeing Yura's crushed body. Damn it. Where is he? Kankuro had only gone to check the situation above, and didn't know anything that had happened in the room. He should never have left. He knew that Gaara had been to kill Yura, due to the unique way the body was mangled. He just didn't know why. He had to find his little brother. He turned to run out of the room again, but bumped into another group of people as he rounded a corner. Whoa, Kankuro, what's the rush? Naruto said as he got back up. He held out a hand to the puppeteer, bringing him back to his feet. I can't find Gaara, he exclaimed. The assembled shinobi gasped, even just as a messenger ran from the other direction. Lord Kankuro, he bowed. What is it? Kankuro yelled, not having time. There have been reports of battle on the outside of the far wall of the village. The messenger gasped. Behind the village? Kankuro inquired, already moving. The messenger confirmed, and the puppeteer raced off, being followed by the shinobi from Leaf and Stone. Gaara looked down, seeing his blood on the sand, even as more dripped. Chunks of his sand armor were falling off as well, and his ultimate defense was dissolving back into formless sand. Anger filled the redhead as he thought about this traitor of the village he commanded, and at the fact that he was trying to kill him. Gaara clapped his hands together, leading his hands into a series of seals strung together with a final clap. Sand tsunami. The sand underneath him started to undulate, and he used that power to leap backward, distancing himself from the other sand nin. From the point they originally stood, the sand rose and began rushing towards Sasori in the form of a giant wave. Deidara leapt back onto his bird, flapping into the air high enough to not be stuck, but not so high as to be seen by the villagers. Sasori started jumping back, but the waves were too fast, and he was buffeted by the sand. This Jinchuriki is more powerful than we'd anticipated. The puppeteer thought as he went under for a second. The waves stopped, and the landscape had changed. The ground was normal from the point where Gaara had originally stood, back. However, from the point he'd stood, forward, the sand was very low, leading up as a hill until the wall. The sand was only inches from the top. Sasori climbed from the sand, feeling it irritating his inner mechanisms. Damn it, he muttered. However, Gaara wasn't done with his assault. He made the ram seal. Sand burial prison. The sands began shifting again under Sasori's feet. The puppeteer was unable to move because of a quicksand-like effect that began sucking him under. He tried to struggle, but the sand in his joints made it difficult to move. Soon, he was entirely submerged, and was plunging further underground than any shinobi was meant to be. Wow, Deidara said. He's more impressive than we thought, Wonder how you'll get out of this, Sasori, my man. He watched as Gaara walked over the sand to the place where the wave had rose up. He jumped down into the hollow that he'd made, standing before the hill. He clapped his hands once more, and slammed his palms against the ground in front of him. Giant sand burial. A shockwave spread out across the hill, sand dropping as it compressed. 3 shockwaves followed the first, further compressing the sand, until all was quiet. Then, a deep whirring noise began, coming from deep, deep underground. Suddenly, the sand under Deidara's bird erupted with thousands of chakra threads that attached themselves to the unarmed bomb. The whirring grew louder as Sasori made his way to the surface. The sand burst as it released Sasori, and Gaara finally saw how he could escape. Sasori's 2 shirts had been torn away by the sand, and Gaara could see that he was a puppet. The strands from earlier, and the ones that Sasori was using to reel himself up, were coming from a compartment on the right side of his chest. The whirring came from 2 spinning claws that were attached to his lower back. There was an open cavity, where his stomach would be, that housed some kind of black cord. In the left side of his chest, where the heart should be, was a cylinder with the kanji scorpion painted on it. The claws had helped him cut through the sand, and the threads had helped pull him along. However, the 3-pronged attack did give Sasori some damage. His right arm was gone, broken off at the shoulder, and he had dents in his body in several places. In a few spots the sand had wore holes in his body. That was a very nice attempt. Sasori complimented with an off-putting laugh. His blades gleamed in the last rays of sunlight as they stopped rotating. He raised his arms again, launching another high-powered blast of water. Gaara's sand rose, blocking the flow from its master. However, the water was a distraction. While the sand stayed up, ready to ward off any more attacks, Sasori fired the poison-coated cable wrapped up inside his stomach. He pointed his remaining shooter at the stinger on the end, firing them. They coated the stinger in water, along with the cable that trailed behind it. The sharp spike punched through the sand, wrapping around Gaara's neck. Gaara began to sputter, hands around the thick cable, trying to pull it off. However, all he got for his efforts were hands that tore on the rough cord, and poison flowing into his bloodstream. The water on the cable diluted the poison enough to where it wouldn't be fatal, and had the added effect of weakening the sand armor around Gaara's neck. Between the poison and the cable, Gaara soon passed out of consciousness. "Take care of him," Sasori said, calming down. He flung the cable, unwinding it from around the Jinchuriki's neck. Gaara's body arced through the air, being caught by Deidara's bird. The bird swallowed the cage, keeping him safe inside its stomach. "Now, let's get the hell out of here," Sasori commanded. He began spinning his claws again, using them to boost his speed and race away. Deidara's sweat dropped. Now he knows how I felt back in Iowa. His bird began flapping its wings and the blonde followed his partner around the perimeter of the wall to leave the way they came. It was time to get to their closest hideout and seal their fourth biju. 5 minutes later, Kankuro and the others leapt over the wall, hoping to find Gaara still in battle. However, all they could see was sand. Where are they? Kankuro yelled. Calm down, Kakashi advised. Don't worry, we'll find them. He and Sasuke walked down the sandy hill Gaara had left behind, heading to the dark red of Gaara's blood. They made a few seals. Summoning jutsu. They called together. When the smoke cleared, Biscuit and Pakun stood, pawing at the sand. What I need? Pakun asked, saggy skin around his eyes making him look tired. Yeah, Sasuke. Biscuit began. What's up? We need you two to use your noses and see if you can track Gaara from his blood. Kakashi explained. You mean the kid from the Chunin exams 2 years ago? Pakun asked. Kakashi nodded. I can still remember the smell of that kid. The small dog's fur ruffled as he shivered. Biscuit obediently lowered his nose to the blood that stained the sand, taking in the scent. Both dogs turned and took off at a run, following the wall around. Let's go, Naruto yelled, and the group ran after the nin dogs. Sasuke flared his Sharingan, keeping an eye out, when he saw something glowing under the sand. Stop, he screamed. The dogs skidded to a halt, but Naruto tripped in his haste, flying over the dogs. Damn it, Sasuke cried. He slid up a sleeve, drawing a shuriken from his ceiling tattoo. He threw it, a shimmering line of ninja wire trailing behind it. The throwing star wrapped the wire around Naruto, and Sasuke gave a mighty heave that brought Naruto back to the safe side of the sands. What the hell, Sasuke? Naruto cried, picking himself up from the sand. Sasuke didn't speak, but walked forward. He passed the dogs, and sparks faintly flickered around him. There are landmines buried underneath us, he said calmly, sparks keeping them from detonating. Uzaga glared. Deidara. Well, how do we get past? Sakura asked. It's not a problem, Sasuke said. For an Uchiha. Kuretsuchi scoffed. Fine, go ahead and show off, Uchiha. We'll be ready to clean the sand when you blow yourself up. Sasuke smirked, eyes spinning. See, Earth-style ninjutsu is weak against the lightning style. Kuretsuchi pouted. Earth isn't weak, she muttered to herself. Chidori current. The occasional spark that flitted across his body crackled, becoming a blast of pure lightning that was bigger than any the Uchiha had created before, enveloping the Sharingan user. There were muffled pops underground, and smoke began to waft through the grains. Good job, Sasuke, Kakashi praised. Let's keep moving. We're wasting time. The assembled shinobi set off again, trying to move as fast as possible. However, before long, Sasuke was beginning to fall back. He traveled a few more meters and toppled over. Oh, Biscuit said before he vanished in a puff of smoke. Sasuke. Sakura broke away from the group, going back to her fallen teammate. Kakashi followed, raising his headband to reveal his own Sharingan. He used up too much chakra defusing those landmines. The sensei revealed. He put too much power into it, trying to get all of them. Sasuke tried to climb back to his feet, but they slid out from under him. Here, take some food pills, Sakura offered. Kakashi stopped her. I'm afraid that food pills won't help in this situation. In fact, they might hurt him more. Sakura looked puzzled, so Kakashi continued. You know that the pills give a burst of chakra to help replenish some of your reserves, but any seasoned shinobi will tell you to never take them when you've used too much chakra. What you have to keep in mind is that these pills are like a steroid boost to keep you going. When you're low on chakra, one pill will only give you enough chakra to keep moving for a while. You can't fight, or you'll die, and you can't take more pills, or you'll die. Sakura frowned, worrying over the Uchiha like he was a child. I'll be fine, Sasuke said, successfully making to his feet. We need to keep going. Uzaga walked up. Sasuke, you said to me during our battle that your eyes could see when I was out of chakra. You told me, this fight is over. You're out of chakra, and you can't break free. Why aren't your eyes so sharp now? Is it because you don't have enough chakra to use them? Sasuke looked to the ground. Kakashi clapped a hand on his shoulder. It's okay, Sasuke. He looked up and saw his sensei's eye crinkle in a smile. Kankuro, you take Sasuke back to the village. Kankuro was indignant. I can't go back to the village. I have to save Gaara. I understand that. Kakashi began. However, I also understand that you won't be much help to us, due to being a long-range fighter, and Sasuke will only get in the way. It's for your brother's own good that you go back. Kankuro stared hard at the sand under his feet. Okay. He went to Sasuke, helping him up and putting the Uchiha's arm around his neck. Sakura took up his other side, and the two carried him back toward the village. Was it wise to let Sakura go too? We've lost 3 fighters, Yuzaga pointed out. There's still 5 of us, Kakashi said optimistically, pulling his headband back down. But will that be enough? Akatsuki asked. PFFT. Kuretsuchi scoffed. 5 is too many. Kakashi ignored the kunoichi's comment, instead opting to answer Akatsuki. It'll have to be. Hey, Sasori, my man. Deidara called to the puppeteer. Sasori looked over his shoulder as he ran, keeping watch of his surroundings with the corner of his eye. What, Deidara? The blonde's expression was a mixture of excitement, and possibly worry. My landmines detonated. That means that somebody knows we got the cage, and tried to chase us down. Sasori smiled wildly. That suits me just fine. He skidded to a stop in the sand. Keep going, Deidara. I'm going to watch for anyone else, and clean up. Deidara stared at the redhead. Wouldn't it be easier to just go? He called down. This way, we get rid of the rats quicker. And there's no chance of losing the Jinchuriki. Deidara didn't like the idea much, but knew his partner was right, and smarter than him. Fine. He relented. Don't leave yet though. I have to make some preparations. Sasori said, pulling a scroll from his back. He made a seal, releasing a puppet that looked exactly like the one he inhabited at that moment, except that it had no eyes, and there was no scorpion cylinder in its chest. When Kakashi and the others happened upon Sasori, his old puppet body was replaced with the new body, wearing a new cloak. This meant that none of the assembled knew what Sasori could do, not even Yuzaga, who had been an opponent. Well. The Stone Nin, friend of Deidara. Former. Yuzaga said shortly. That's neither here nor there. I'm glad you lived through our battle, but I believe I told you not to make me regret saving you. I'm not going to regret it, am I? You'd better fucking believe you're gonna regret it. Yuzaga exclaimed. Then he stopped, turning his head away from Sasori, in thought. Damn it, he muttered. I'm not here for you. He said aloud. I'm here for retribution against Deidara for the death of my cousin. Sasori laughed. I'm just as much at fault for his death as Deidara. He said, condescendingly. Doesn't matter. Yuzaga replied. I'm still gonna kick his ass. But if you get out of the way, I promise, you can die next time. I'm afraid none of you are going to get past me. Yuzaga glared at the puppeteer, who returned the gaze coolly. I'm going ahead, the Stone Nin said to his companions without turning. I'm not sure if that's wise, little brother. Akatsuki said gently. Yeah, Kuretsuchi said. I want to go find Deidara. Yuzaga looked at the blush on his sister's cheeks as she said the missing nin's name. Are you serious? After everything that happened, him leaving, coming back, blowing up the village, taking Jikai, and killing him, you still love that guy? Kuretsuchi sniffed, trying to remain dignified. You wouldn't understand. Yuzaga cocked an eyebrow at her. I wouldn't understand. That's rich. I think after the last 6 months, I understand better than you do. Kuretsuchi's eyes flicked to the ground, the girl taken aback. Not that this isn't fascinating, Sasori interrupted. But wouldn't you rather your last words be something meaningful? Kuretsuchi's eyes went back to the red-headed puppeteer. You're right, Yuzaga. I shouldn't be the one to fight Deidara. I'd be in your way. I'll make you an opening. Yuzaga shook his head. Remember, I fought him. It's gonna take more than just you, sister. He turned to his brother. Akatsuki, would you mind helping her out? Akatsuki shook his head slowly. I'm supposed to protect you. I can't let you go off on your own. Yuzaga cursed. How about this? Naruto proposed. Kuretsuchi, Akatsuki, and Kakashi-sensei fight this guy, and I give Yuzaga some backup. We'll even take Pakun with us, so we know where we're going. Akatsuki thought about it. I remember seeing your ability during the exams. He pondered. Okay, that sounds good to me. His smile dropped from his face, leaving it battle-ready as he faced Sasori. Get ready to go. Yuzaga nodded, clapping Naruto on the back. Kuretsuchi, Akatsuki. The siblings flicked their eyes to their younger brother. Be careful. The two nodded, preparing to fight. Uzaga and Naruto began to run across the sand. Not so fast, Sasori cried. He opened his cloak a little, at stomach level, and unleashed the poisoned cable he used to fight Gaara. It flew at an incredible speed at the two, intent on spearing the both of them. Akatsuki, showing amazing agility, leapt in front of the cable. Earth style, he cried, slamming his hands in a seal. Earth Golem Jutsu. He opened his mouth and spewed a mouthful of liquid rock. The rock broke away from Akatsuki's mouth, taking the shape of a warrior that took the hit from the cable. That's a pretty sturdy attack, Kakashi noted. Akatsuki smiled. That's my Earth Golem. It's different from the Golem Brother summons, but it can take a lot of damage. Good for defending. Sasori smirked, watching the retreating backs of Naruto and Uzaga. I guess you're my opponents. I'll kill the three of you, and then kill the other two. The cable ripped backward, out of the golem, and retracted back into his stomach cavity. Akatsuki let his Earth Golem break apart and drop to the sand. Here's the plan, Kakashi said quietly, never taking his visible eye off of the puppeteer. I'll attack him directly, and you two will back me up. Sound good. Kuretsuchi started to object, but Akatsuki cut her off. Of course, Master Kakashi. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. Master, I don't think Deidara had too much time to take off before we found him. Uzaga panted. The two were racing across the desert, following the pug Nin dog, but didn't quite know where their prey had gone. The desert continued for miles in front of them, but the Land of Fire's forests were far off to the sides of them, marking the border with the Land of Wind. Deidara could have gone anywhere. Pakin's nose twitched, and he ran off to the left, in a northeastern direction. He was heading for the forest. He went this way. The dog yelled back. This isn't working, Uzaga declared. We're not fast enough to cover the distance. We'll lose him, or worse, be too wiped out to fight him. He did some quick thinking on his feet. Do you have any kind of jutsu that could get us moving a little faster? I've got my wind style, updraft, but I don't want to leave you behind. Naruto thought for a few seconds. Well, I could always modify the technique Pervy Sage taught me to fight Lee, he mumbled to himself. He snapped his fingers. Got it. He narrowed his eyes in concentration, and Uzaga saw his chakra flare around his legs. Sand began to swirl around his feet as he stepped, the chakra turning into small, green whirlwinds around his legs. He quickly passed Uzaga, speed increased by at least 3 times. Fantastic, Uzaga hollered, making the monkey seal. Get on my back, Pakun, he called. The pug leapt at the same time he did. Wind style. Updraft, emerald streams of wind burst from his hands, propelling him to catch up with the blonde Jinchuriki. We'll catch him in no time. Lava style. Quicklime jutsu. Kuretsuchi cried, firing a blob of some white substance from her mouth at the puppeteer. She then followed up with another technique. Water style. Water trumpet. She held her hand up in front of her mouth, blasting water from it. Sasori let the quicklime jutsu hit, and the water trumpet followed, turning the lava-style jutsu into a goop that restricted the movement of the redhead. Usually, such a move in the desert would be useless due to the overbearing heat, however, the sun had set, and a chill moved across the dunes. Now, Kakashi, the kunoichi cried. The copy ninja put his hands in the cross seal that his student was famous for. Shadow Clone Jutsu. An identical copy appeared, and both channeled even more chakra. They stretched a hand out to one another, lightning crackling between them. The two charged forward, lightning forming a chain. Lightning blade. Raiden's chain. They ran past the puppeteer, lightning cutting through his body at the waist, with no resistance. Kuretsuchi pumped the air with her fist, thinking the fight over. How cute, Sasori said from the ground. He was still very much alive, and no blood came from the severe wound he'd taken. The girl could see that his body was hollow. Chakra glowed around the edges of his body, and the legs stood back up. The torso floated up before fusing seamlessly with the other half. The bottom of the Akitsuki robe lay at his feet, with him only wearing the top. His claw-like blades extended out, poking from under the frayed edge. The girl actually thought it would be that easy. Sasori laughed to himself. Kakashi's clone dispersed, leaving him holding a regular lightning blade. Sasori turned to him. That was a very nice try. He complimented. But I can put this body back together as many times as I need to. He's a puppet, Kakashi realized. But then, there has to be a weak spot. The copy ninja knew he just had to find it, and exploit it. I know what you're thinking. Sasori said. You think I'll let you use that Sharingan of yours to find a weakness? Do I seem that foolish to you? Kakashi's eyes widened. He figured it out. Sasori reached under what was left of his robe, pulling out a scroll. The scroll was, in theory, the third from a series on his back, due to the number 3 being written on it in kanji. Kakashi focused the Sharingan. That doesn't look good. There was a mass of chakra inside the puppet, and Sasori was getting ready to release it. The puppeteer crouched, unrolling the scroll across the sand in front of him. He smiled, sending a chill up the spines of the 3 opposing shinobi, and placed his hands on a seal in the center. A massive puff of smoke obscured him for a moment. A clacking sound rose up. The sound of wood against wood. The smoke cleared, and Sasori remained crouched, arms stretched out to his left. Rising up behind him, attached with chakra threads, was an incredibly detailed, human-like puppet. The puppet's hair was dark blue, or black, and spiked like Jiraiya's. Not much else could be seen, as the puppet wore a dark cloak with a fringe of light brown fur as the collar. Why does that puppet look so familiar? Kakashi thought back through all his past battles, trying to think of where he'd seen the puppet. However, it was his Chunin exams that jogged his memory. It was a long time ago, when he was only 6 years old. Suna was hosting in the exams that year, and Kakashi remembered the face of the man who led the village. Kakashi remembered the third cage so vividly because it was only 3 years later that the man vanished. But surely that puppet was just a puppet, right? Just a likeness. Or was it? Kakashi could very clearly see the chakra that emanated from the puppet. Sasori's smile grew. I see you figured it out, he said, startling Kakashi with his admission. This is the body of the third cage, transformed into a puppet for my use, and my use alone. He flicked a finger, and the puppet's mouth opened. Streams of what looked to be sand spilled from the puppet's mouth, floating around the wooden weapon. However, the sand was a dark gray color. What's that? Kuretsuchi asked. Sasori was glad to answer. This is the Kazekage's special, iron sand. The third cage used his magnetic chakra to control iron powder, in the same way the Shukaku controlled sand. But, if that's a puppet, how can he use the magnetic chakra? Akatsuki asked the copy ninja. Kakashi had no answer, but the puppeteer was ecstatic to reveal the secret. I have a special method for retaining the abilities of the shinobi I model my puppets off of, he paused. And what would that method be? Kakashi said, having his suspicions. Sasori's smile grew so large that Kakashi thought his wooden face would crack. I use their bodies. Kuretsuchi made a disgusted noise. Their bodies. The redhead nodded slowly. Their bodies. They're called human puppets. When I defeat a particularly powerful shinobi, I transform his still-living body into my next puppet. He trained his gaze on the copy ninja. I'm particularly eager to make you into a puppet, Kakashi Hatake. Kakashi was confused. Why me? It's quite simple, actually. Your father killed my parents. So, I think it's only fair that I get to kill you, and take your body. He manipulated the puppet's arms, making seals. Iron sand shower. The iron sand began to form together in small clumps, becoming a smaller scaled version of Gaara's sand shower. Kakashi watched the puppet's chakra flicker in a wave. As soon as the wave touched the iron sand, the bullets fired, repelled by the magnetism. Goodbye, Kakashi Hatake, Sasori said as the bullets closed in on the copy ninja and his companions. Deidara had picked a spot right outside the Akitsuki hideout, waiting for his partner to arrive. The boulder still blocked the entrance to the cave, and his bird hovered just above the water. Soon, he felt that familiar chakra approaching. Instead of relief, he felt annoyed. It wasn't Sasori coming for him, but Uzaga, along with another shinobi with immense power. Damn it. It's time to end this pitiful revenge plot, Time to die, little Uzaga. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of whistling wind. The trees on the cliffs above him burst apart, revealing the 2 shinobi in pursuit. There was Uzaga, propelled along by winds from his palms, along with a blonde he'd never seen before, whose lower body was hidden by his own personal tempest. Give Gaara back, the blonde exclaimed, headed on a collision course for the Akitsuki bomber. Deidara's visible eye widened in recognition as he maneuvered away from the whirling winds. You've gotta be the Kyuubi brat. he exclaimed. Naruto's forehead furrowed. You're wondering how I know, right? There's two reasons. 1. No one but a Jinchuriki would really want to rescue a Jinchuriki. 2. I've been talking to Itachi about you. He grinned at the anger that raged on Naruto's face. He said the Kyuubi Jinchuriki would have whiskers on his face, and would be the first one to jump in and start barking. Naruto started forward, but Uzaga stepped in the way. Calm down, Naruto, he commanded. He's just trying to piss you off. He stared coldly at the missing nin. Deidara's smile grew. By the way, Uzaga, I hope your screams aren't as girly as Jikai's. I always thought you'd take death like a man, instead of a little bitch. Uzaga's eyes narrowed, and a roar began ripping at his vocal cords. Today's the day you die, you bastard traitor.